Welcome back to Goofy Harry. Today's adventure is titled, What If Harry Potter Was Percy Jackson's Older Half-Brother and Son of Poseidon? If you haven't already, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The boy who drowned the Dursleys. The hose moved before he touched it. Harry noticed and didn't notice at the same time, the way you notice your own breath only when something asks you about it. He was standing on the lawn at number 4, Privet Drive, in the second week of the summer holidays, with the afternoon pressing down on him in the particular English way that isn't heat so much as damp boredom made into weather. Aunt Petunia had given him a list on a yellow notepad. Water the dahlias. Weed the lavender. Rinse the car. Do not come inside until the list was done, because she had a bridge club at 3 and wanted the windows free of his face. The hose lay coiled on the flagstone by the rose bushes, the nozzle pointing at the sky. Harry hadn't yet turned the tap. He bent to pick up the nozzle and it bumped up into his palm as if it had been lifted from underneath by a little wave. He stopped. He stood there for a long moment, holding a rubber hose in a suburban garden, listening to something that wasn't making a sound. The hose lay quiet in his fingers like anything. He told himself that nothing had moved. He had bent and he had picked it up and his hand had done the work. He was tired. He was 14 and had just finished his 3rd year at Hogwarts, and had not slept well since Sirius had slipped out of his life on a hippogriff over the Scottish hills at midnight. And people imagined things when they were tired. He turned the tap and watered the dahlias. The water braided itself. He didn't see it so much as feel it through the rubber, a steadier, smoother pressure than Privet Drive's mains had any business producing. The dahlias got exactly as much as they needed. The soil darkened in a neat ring around each stem, no overflow onto the mulch. When he aimed at the lavender, the spray narrowed itself into a gentler mist without him adjusting the nozzle. Boy, Aunt Petunia was at the kitchen window. He had not heard the window open. You are to water the bedding plants, not drown them. Mind you keep it off the patio or you'll have Vernon to answer to. Yes, Aunt Petunia, and don't stand about daydreaming at my hose. No, Aunt Petunia. She watched him until he moved, then swept away. The curtain at the kitchen twitched. Harry stood under the sun with the hose in his hand and the faintest sensation running up his wrist like a second pulse, and he didn't know how to describe it to himself, so he didn't. He rinsed the car instead. Vernon's Rover, fat and navy, caked in town dust from its daily pilgrimage to the works in Guildford. Harry walked the length of the bonnet with the hose. The water climbed the paint in a sheet that did not drip. It hung there watching him. He lowered the hose. The water, released, slid down the Rover's flanks in one soft gesture and pooled at the tires. The car gleamed. It had never gleamed that fast. From somewhere near the wheelie bins there was a snigger. Harry's stomach did the thing it had done in childhood, the old Dudley is nearby squeeze. He looked up. Dudley had come down the side path with Piers Polkiss and Gordon Smitten behind him, all 3 of them in Smelting's football shirts, despite the fact that none of them played football, and none of them, Harry suspected, had a functional grasp of the offside rule. Dudley had grown a further half-inch in Harry's absence and lost a quarter-stone, which was a change in his silhouette but not in his program. "What are you doing, Potter?" Dudley said. "Chores," Harry said and turned the hose to the hubcap. "Didn't Mum tell you to water the plants?" "I did. She told me she told you to weed the lavender. You haven't weeded the lavender." Dudley came a step closer, confident the way a boy is confident when he has brought friends who know how to back a line. "Thought you were some hotshot at your freak school and can't even follow a list." "You could help," Harry said, mild. "It's your mother's lavender." The 3 of them laughed because Harry had said something they'd decided to find stupid. Piers said, "Let him drown in the hose." Gordon said, "Drown him for real." Dudley grinned and took another step, and his right trainer landed square in the lavender Harry had just misted. Harry said, "Move your foot, Dudley." "Make me." The puddle at the rover's tire moved. Harry felt it before he saw it. The rubber was suddenly warm in his hand like something living. The water at the rover's tire lifted an inch, slid across the flagstones, and climbed Dudley's trainer. It did not splash. It climbed, the way ivy climbs, and went up his ankle and vanished inside his trouser cuff, cold all the way. Dudley shrieked like a small woman. "It's in my sock! It's in my sock! It's in my sock!" "What did you do?" Piers said, and Piers's voice was higher than it had been a second ago. "I didn't do anything," Harry said, which had never in his life been true. This time it felt almost true. He had not said a word. He had not reached for his wand. His wand was under his pillow upstairs because Uncle Vernon had confiscated his trunk the day he came home, and Harry had only got the wand back by promising, on pain of another locked door, not to touch it in the house. Dudley was hopping. The water was climbing him like a tide that had mistaken him for a cliff. "Harry!" "Stop," Harry said. The water stopped. It dropped off Dudley in a single cool cascade and pooled on the flagstones, a flat ring with a clean edge. Dudley stood in the middle of the ring with his trouser leg darkened to the knee and his face the color of cottage cheese. Piers and Gordon had already retreated 6 feet. The sprayer in Harry's hand was quiet. Harry himself was barely breathing. The hose had done what he thought at it, and he had not known until the moment it happened that he thought at it. He tried experimentally to bring the ring of water up again. It came up an inch, eager as a dog. He put it down. "Potter," Dudley said, and the old bluster was gone from his voice, because even Dudley had a quality of animal sense, and his animal sense had just told him to be afraid. "I'm telling." "Go on then," Harry said, and was surprised by the calm of his own voice. Dudley went on. He went up the side path at a wet, hobbling run, with Piers and Gordon backing away behind him, and within a minute Uncle Vernon was in the garden with his face the color of an old brick and his tie over his shoulder. "Get in the house," Vernon said. "I was doing the get in the house this minute or so help me." Harry dropped the hose, walked past Vernon and went in the house. He kept his breath on a tight rein. He had learned that in Snape's office of all places, that when a man like Vernon was shouting, you did not have to shout back. You had to walk and walk evenly and not let him see that your hands were the hands of someone who had just, without meaning to, lifted water up a boy's leg like a living thing. Vernon locked him in his room. "I do not know what you did to Dudley," Vernon said through the door. "I do not want to know what you did to Dudley. You will stay in this room, boy. You will not come down for supper. You will not come down for breakfast. You will not come down until I say you will come down. Am I understood?" "Yes, Uncle Vernon," Harry said, because saying anything else would cost him and would not change the door. He heard the locks, 3 of them. Vernon had added 2 more after Dobby. Harry sat on the edge of the bed, in the pinched box room that had been his since Hagrid had come off the door at the hut on the rock and ended the cupboard under the stairs forever, and he put his hands out in front of him and looked at them. They were the same hands they had been 10 minutes ago. They had cast patronesses and lit wands and opened chamber doors, and held a broom at 100 miles an hour in a storm. He turned his right hand over and looked at the pale palm. He thought very carefully the word water. He thought of the water that had stood at the rover's tire. He thought of the way it had listened. The water in the glass on his bedside table trembled. He watched it. He thought up. It came up 1/4 of an inch above the rim and hung there. It did not spill. He thought ring. It flattened into a ring, a small floating coronet of water held in the air like a lifted ribbon. He thought down. It went down. It resettled into the glass as if it had never left, and a single bead, absurd and perfect, sat on the surface tension for a moment before it merged. Harry sat on his bed in his uncle's house, and did not cry and did not speak, and did not breathe very much. He stared at the glass. The lavender and the dahlias and the rover all made a different sort of sense suddenly, as did the winter afternoon at the Black Lake when the Weasley twins had dared him out onto the ice, and the ice had thinned in a ring around him that Professor McGonagall had called bad luck and a southerly wind. As did the summer at the age of 6 when he had flooded Aunt Petunia's kitchen without touching a tap, as did the long afternoons down at the prefect's bath last term with the door locked and the tap open, when he had held his breath under the surface longer than any boy his age had any business holding it, and come up not out of need but out of boredom. A quiet part of him, the part that had spent 2 years whispering that he was not like the other boys in his year for reasons he didn't fully know, said, "About time." A louder part of him, the part that had grown up under Vernon Dursley, said, "Nobody is going to believe this, and nobody is going to make it make sense for you, so put your head down and work." He put his head down. He took a sheet of paper out from under the loose floorboard, the floorboard Dobby hadn't known about, and a pencil. He started a list. Water moves when I think at it. Hose, puddle, glass, no wand, no word, Aunt P didn't notice. Dudley did because I pushed. How far, how heavy, how fast. Not magic exactly, no wand, no trace to the ministry. So what is it? He stopped at the last line and didn't answer it. He had an answer he didn't want to write down, and he also wasn't, on present evidence, entitled to believe he had an answer. He folded the paper and put it back under the floorboard. Then he went to the window and opened it. The summer evening smelled of cut grass and petrol and one of Mrs. No. 6's stupidly overcooked roasts. Beyond the roofs of Privet Drive, the sky was starting to go that lean kind of blue that promised a good sunset. A pair of magpies were fighting over something on the shed. Normal. Something wasn't normal on the windowsill. It was a seashell. It was small, the length of his thumbnail, and perfect. It was a little scallop, ridged, the outside pale fawn, the inside mother of pearl with a pink throat. It sat on the painted wood as if someone had placed it there. Harry did not touch it. He looked at it. He checked the window. The latch had been closed. He had just opened it. He checked the air for owls. Hedwig was out hunting. He checked the ivy. The ivy was ivy. He picked up the shell. It was warm. He put it in his pocket. He was still standing at the window when the owl arrived. It was a ministry owl, gray-brown and brisk and unfamiliar, with the little scroll tie of an official dispatch. It knocked once on the glass with its beak and let him take the letter from its leg with the patience of a creature that had flown a great many miles that day and had stopped caring. Harry broke the seal. He had a bad 2 seconds before he started reading because he thought, in the way you always do when a ministry owl arrives on a day you have moved water with your mind, that it was about underage magic. Harry had learned in year 2 that the ministry's trace didn't discriminate between pupils and house elves, and he had learned in year 3 that he could expect a letter whenever a muggle sneezed near his wand. The letter wasn't about underage magic. Dear Mr. Potter, I hope this finds you in reasonable health. I am writing, belatedly and with apology for the lateness, to request an audience with you at the end of this week. I will come myself in person on Friday to collect you. There are certain matters relating to your heritage which we have deferred far too long, and which in light of recent and older events I no longer feel comfortable deferring. Please be ready to travel by 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon and pack for a week. Your aunt and uncle have been informed. Yours, with affection, Albus Dumbledore. Harry read it twice. Heritage. He sat down on the bed with the letter on his knee and let the word do its work. Dumbledore, who had never once in 3 years spoken of Harry's mother and father in terms that sounded like heritage. Dumbledore, who had let Snape call them up like scars during every lesson for 3 years without stepping in. Dumbledore, who had known something about Harry for 10 years and had not ever, to Harry's knowledge, used that particular word out loud. The shell in Harry's pocket was warm against his thigh. The glass of water on his bedside table was a little closer to the edge of the table than he remembered leaving it. He hadn't told it to do that. He hadn't even looked at it. Something, Harry thought, is happening to me. He folded the letter into his pocket next to the shell. Then he found he could not sit still. He found, in fact, that he had 2 days and 5 hours until Friday at 3, and he wanted to spend every minute of them figuring out where water was in the garden, and how much it would listen if he asked it something a little harder. He had been locked in a room and told he could not come down, and he had been told it would not be the worst thing in the world, but he had also been told by a letter, by a shell, by a tremor in a glass, that something important was about to be said to him, and that he ought to be ready for it. He had, he thought, got rather good at being ready. He put the letter with the list under the floorboard and went to sleep early, head on his arms, shoes on. He dreamed. He was on a beach he had never seen. The sand was gray, the kind of gray that was really 1,000 tiny colors pretending to be one. The sea was flat. A pier stuck out into it the length of a field, old wood, barnacled. There was a man on the pier who turned to face him. The man was tall and tanned and had a fisherman's knit jumper the color of the shore, and his eyes, when they found Harry's, were the same green. Not a similar green. The same. "You grow too loud," the man said. The wind took his voice and gave it back. "He will hear you soon." Harry wanted to ask who, and also wanted to ask what was happening, and also wanted to say a lot of things he had rehearsed on the stairs of the Dursleys' house in the long nights of his childhood, which he had never been able to speak. None of it came out. He stood on the sand and watched his own face in a grown man's face and said, "Are you—" "I am sorry," the man said. "I did not know." Then, on the tide line, a boy appeared. He was maybe 11. Smaller than Harry, in a dark blue hoodie a size too big, with the same eyes and plainly not the same life. The boy looked up and saw Harry and stopped. He was holding a beach stone in one fist. "Go to him," the man said, and the sea moved once softly and the dream fractured and was gone. Harry woke tasting salt. He sat up, disoriented, on a bed made up for a 14-year-old in a box room in Surrey, and he touched his tongue to his lip, and it was salt, not the sweat of summer sleep but proper sea salt, as if he had gone for a swim with his mouth open. It was 2 in the morning. Hedwig was on her perch. She had come back while he slept. There were letters on the floor beside the bed that she had evidently dropped there when he hadn't woken. He picked them up. Hermione from Bulgaria, neat round handwriting. A postcard of the Rila Monastery with a small and earnest lecture on the back about local dark creature regulations. Ron from the Burrow, because the Egypt trip had been the previous summer and his handwriting in the margin said, "Well, obviously you knew that, Harry, get a grip," followed by several Chudley Cannon's underscores and a line about Quidditch at the World Cup. "Dad got tickets. You, us, Bill, Charlie, Hermione. Try and get your uncle to say yes, will you? We'll help if he won't." Harry smiled in the dark at his friends, and then, because something in him was bigger than his friends tonight, he did not write back yet. He got up instead. He lifted the glass of water from the bedside table, went to the window, and poured the water out onto the sill. It didn't fall. It sat in a puddle the size of his palm, and when he looked at it, it raised itself a 1/4 inch and made a shape for him. A circle, then an oval, then, because he thought of the dream, a stylized wave. He whispered, "Go in." The water went back into the glass. He set the glass down and stood in the dark for a long minute, breathing. On the sill, where the puddle had been, there was a faint salt line. Privet Drive, he thought, is 60 miles from the sea. He went back to bed with the shell under his pillow. In Albania that night, in a ruined Albanian house that the local people had stopped telling their children about 60 years ago, a very thin, very pale thing that had once been a man was pacing. Pacing was not quite the word. There was not enough of him to pace. His body was a rag of borrowed meat propped up on magic and will. He moved in short, deliberate circuits along the wall and spoke, in a voice that would not carry beyond this room, to a smaller, rounder, balder man who was sitting on a stool with his hands folded in his lap like a boy waiting to be told what to do. "It is wrong," the thin thing said. "The resurrection rite is wrong." "My lord," said Wormtail, "the rite is as you specified." "The rite is as I specified, and the rite is wrong. I tested the bone of the father. I tested the servant's flesh. I tested, for the third component, a drop of my own blood from the snake's stomach because it was what I had. It turned to dust on the knife. It did not turn to ichor. It did not turn Wormtail." Wormtail did not ask what ichor was. Wormtail had long ago learned not to ask things his master said as if to himself. The thin thing stopped. He turned his head in an angle that was not quite human anymore, and his red eyes fixed on the stove and then on nothing. "The boy killed me," he said, "by being a boy whose blood was not blood." Wormtail swallowed. "The spell I cast on Hallowan of 81 was a killing curse. It was properly cast. It should have killed a child of any power. It did not kill this child. For 12 years I have told myself that his mother's sacrifice was reason enough. It is not reason enough. A mother's sacrifice bends a curse. It does not shatter a Dark Lord's body. The answer has been in the recipe all along, and I have refused to see it, because to see it is to think in a direction that I have never thought." He came a step closer to Wormtail, and Wormtail kept his eyes on his knees. "The boy has blood," the thin thing said. "That is not our kind of blood. His father was not the James Potter whose bones I saw on the parlor floor. His father was something else." A pause. "Something older." Wormtail lifted his eyes a fraction. "My lord, another wizard." "Number," the thin thing almost laughed. It came out as a rasp. "There are things older than wizards." Wormtail's hand went to the scar he was growing in place of one he had lost, and he did not speak. "There is a boy in Manhattan," the thin thing said after a long silence. "I have heard him, the way one hears a bell under water, for a year and a half now. I had thought he was the echo of the one in Surrey. He is not. He is another instance." He turned. He stood, and the stone floor felt cold even through his borrowed feet. "Send Avery," he said. "Not to Surrey, to Manhattan. He will find the second instance. He will take the blood we need. The Potter boy may have been warded when he was small, but the Manhattan one will not be, and a second son's blood will do the same work. Bone, flesh, blood, old blood. The rite completes." Wormtail did not ask how the Dark Lord had heard a boy in Manhattan. He bowed. He had, somewhere in his small and frightened soul, the sense to recognize that his master had just reached a thought he had been circling for a decade, and that it was the sort of thought a careful man did not interrupt. "Avery tonight," Wormtail said. "Avery now," the thin thing said. The snake in the corner lifted its head and hissed. The thin thing hissed back, and the hiss he made was not in any tongue Wormtail knew, and for a brief flicker, like heat lightning over the sea, the thin thing's eyes were not red but something cold and blue-white, which went away again and became red again, and the thin thing did not remark on it because he did not, himself, know. Back at Privet Drive, Harry slept through a dream he would not remember, and in the morning there was a second shell on his windowsill beside the first. Hedwig stood on the sill with her head to one side, as if to say, "I did not bring that." Harry put both shells in his pocket. He spent Wednesday and Thursday doing every chore on Petunia's notepad, perfectly, twice, including the windows he had not been asked to do, because he wanted the Dursleys to have no further reason to keep him in. He said "yes, Aunt Petunia," and "yes, Uncle Vernon" in the right number of syllables. He did not look at water in their presence. He did not look at water in his own presence either, except at night, when he would sit on the floor by the bedside table and lift the glass's contents into the shape of a ring, a wave, a coiled serpent, a horseshoe. He learned on the Thursday evening that the water came up from the tap easier than it came up from the glass, which puzzled him and didn't. Water remembered where it came from, and where it came from was further down than he had realized. He did not tell Ron. He did not tell Hermione. He wrote them back each a polite, normal letter with the word brilliant in it 3 times for Ron, and with no questions about regulations for Hermione, and he sent Hedwig out. He slept badly Thursday night. He did not dream. He woke with his hand in his pocket around the first shell, and his fingers had been clenched around it so hard that the ridges had left pink tracks across his palm like the marks of a tiny wave. Friday at 3 o'clock he was dressed, shoes on, trunk ready, Hedwig in her cage, standing in the hall of number 4 in the light of the frosted pane. Aunt Petunia was pretending to arrange the letters on the hall table and failing to hide that her hand was shaking. Uncle Vernon was in the living room and had made a point of not coming to the hall. Dudley was in his room and had been in his room since Monday and had not come down for meals and had refused to speak to his father about what had happened in the garden. Harry did not feel bad about this. He felt, for the first time in his life at Privet Drive, a cool and clean patience. The doorbell rang at 3 precisely. Aunt Petunia opened it. It was not Albus Dumbledore. "Watcher," said a witch in her early 20s with short bubblegum pink hair and a motorcycle jacket over ministry robes, and a warm smile for Harry that was the first warm thing his aunt's hall had seen in a week. Behind her stood a tall, thin, tired-looking wizard with prematurely gray hair and scars on one cheek, whom Harry, after 3 years, could have picked out from any crowd. "Harry," Remus Lupin said, "good of you to wait. Slight change of plan." Harry's heart, without permission, went up into his throat. "Professor." "Not professor for the present. Remus, please. Dumbledore's stuck at the Wisengamot until tomorrow, so he's asked us to take the first leg. Do you have everything?" "I have everything." "Good lad," Aunt Petunia said behind her teeth. "You will be away a week. I will be away a week. Do not bring anything back with you." "No, Aunt Petunia." She shut the door behind him before he was down the step. Harry put the trunk in the boot of the little ordinary-looking saloon the witch in the pink hair. "Tonks, please, first name only, the other one's a family curse," had parked behind the garden wall and got in the back seat with Hedwig on his lap, and he looked at the front of number 4 for what he did not yet know was the last time until he was 16, and felt, to his own surprise, nothing at all. "Where are we going?" he said. "Cornwall," Remus said. "Quiet safe house, bit of sea air. Dumbledore thinks proximity to water might help you settle." Harry turned his face to the window so that neither Remus nor Tonks would see the look that passed across it, and he put his hand in his pocket and touched both shells at once. His thumb found the ridged one, the warmer one. Proximity to water might help him settle. "Right," he said evenly. "Sea air, then." The car pulled out of Privet Drive. Hedwig nestled down against his arm. The Friday afternoon sun slanted across the Dursleys' gravel. Harry felt for the first summer in his life that he was not going backwards. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Grim and Godly. The safe house was an old Coast Guard's cottage on a bluff above a cove near Mousehole, with slate on the roof and gorse on the windward side and a kitchen the size of a cupboard. And it smelled, Harry decided as soon as the door shut behind him, of everything his life in Privet Drive hadn't. Paraffin, salt, wet wool. Somewhere out of sight a kettle was already whistling, which Tonks said was because Dumbledore had warded the kettle to whistle whenever he thought about Cornwall. Harry wasn't sure if this was a joke and decided not to ask. Remus took the trunk. Tonks took the owl. Harry took himself, at his own insistence, down the cliff path with nothing in his hands except the shells in his pocket. The path was steeper than it looked. It ran down through a gap in the thrift to a beach that was more pebble than sand, gray and smooth and warm even in the dying light, and when he reached the bottom the sea was in a quieter mood than any sea he remembered. Small, incurious waves lapped at his shoes. The tide was 2/3 out. A pair of oyster-catchers worked the tide line at the far end of the cove. Harry walked 10 paces, stopped, and took his shoes off. He took his socks off. He walked on the pebbles, which were hot enough on the tops to hurt and cold enough in the cracks to wake him up, and he went into the water. It came up to meet him, not rushing, not a picture book coup de theater of surf and thunder. It just gathered. The waves in a ring 6 feet across him stood taller than the other waves, held their crests for an extra breath, curled inward not outward, and when he walked further in they curled with him, keeping his knees in a little bowl of still water while the rest of the cove went on about its evening. He could feel the cold properly on his shins, and he could feel distinctly that the cold wasn't coming for him. Somewhere past his ankles the sea had decided who he was, and it had decided he was a guest. Harry stood in the ring of still water and did what he had not done at any point in the last 3 years, including in the graveyard of a family he didn't remember and the back of a classroom with a Dementor's kiss unspooling out of a boggart. He laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It was small, surprised, a little broken. But it came out, and the oyster-catchers lifted their heads, and he put his palm down on the surface of the ring and felt the sea press back politely, as if being introduced. He stayed until the light turned copper. When he climbed the path again, in his shoes but with his socks in his hand and his trouser cuffs dark, he was calm. He caught his breath at the lip of the cliff and looked along the turf toward the cottage and saw, on the bluff 30 yards off, a black dog. It was not a Welsh sheepdog. It was not a retriever gone astray. It was a big, shaggy, rough-coated dog with a long muzzle and pale, steady, non-doggy eyes. It was sitting on its haunches with its tail curled over its paws and watching Harry the way a person watches. A person who had walked a long way to see you and didn't want you to turn away. Harry stopped on the path. "Hello," he said, experimentally. The dog did not move. "Are you lost?" The dog's tail lifted and laid down once slow, considered not excited. Harry came forward a careful 3 steps. The dog stood. It came forward a careful 3 steps. They met in the middle. Harry held out the back of his hand, the way people held out the backs of their hands to dogs to be sniffed, and the dog sniffed him gravely, and its breath was warm, and it did not bite. Then, with the delicacy of a creature that did not want to be misunderstood, it licked the knuckle of his little finger once and turned and loped away along the cliff toward a hollow in the gorse, where Harry saw. It paused and looked back at him. It went into the hollow and did not come out. Harry stood in the cool air and thought 3 things in sequence. First, that was the Grim from the tea leaves in his 3rd year. Second, that was not just a dog. Third, dogs with pale gray eyes and a particular gravity which followed you across the world and did not bite were sometimes, Harry had reason to know, not dogs at all. "Sirius," he said quietly to the air. The word rode on the sea breeze and went nowhere. "You can't be here. They'll find you." He stood at the edge of the gorse for another minute. And then, because he was not an idiot and neither was the dog, he walked back to the cottage without looking over his shoulder. He told Remus and Tonks that he had seen a black collie up near the bluff and that they might want to put out water for it. And Remus, who knew Harry, gave him a look that said, "I will parse that later, thank you," and poured him a mug of tea. Dumbledore arrived Saturday morning at 9. He came on foot up the lane from a car that had been somebody's kindness, wearing navy robes that passed for a dressing gown to any muggle that glanced at him. And when he put his hand on the doorpost of the Coast Guard's cottage, the kettle, which was in fact warded, began to whistle of its own volition. Tonks said, "Bloody hell, sir, how did you?" And Dumbledore said, "A harmless trick, Nymphadora, an old amusement, please forgive me." And Tonks rolled her eyes and said, "Auntie Dromda will hear about this." He asked Harry if he wanted to walk. They went along the cliff path toward a headland Harry hadn't seen yet, a long, slow southern walk with the cove on their right and the gorse and pasture on their left, and Dumbledore, whose shoes were always impossible shoes, a silk slipper thing with a buckle, and who nevertheless walked a cliff path without once stumbling, did not begin until they had gone a mile. Harry did not hurry him. At the cairn at the end of the headland, where the sea was blue and deep, and a seal was making serious work of a mullet 100 yards out, Dumbledore said, "Harry, we should talk about your father." Harry, to his own surprise, did not type. He said, "Yes, sir." Dumbledore sat down on the wind-smoothed stone of the cairn. He had to sit. He was over 100, and he walked like a man a quarter of that age, but he had his limits. He looked out to sea. He said, "I do not know the whole of what I am going to tell you. I will tell you only what I know and what I suspect, and I will tell you the difference between them. What do you think has been happening to you these last weeks, Harry?" "Water," Harry said. "Yes. It moves for me, no wand, no word. Yes. I thought maybe I'd started doing wandless magic early. I haven't. This isn't that. There's no feel of it. Wandless magic has a feel. You told me that in first year. I remember. This doesn't feel like drawing on me. This feels like the water was already mine." Dumbledore was silent for a little while. A turn went past at eye level. He said, "That is, I think, an honest and a correct description." "What is it, sir?" "Harry, do you remember your father?" "Number, I don't. I know what he looked like. The mirror of Eris showed me what he looked like. He looked like me. A bit." "He did," Dumbledore said. "He was a fine man and a better father than I believe any of us knew how to be in our time. He loved you without reservation. I say this because I need you to believe it when I tell you the next thing." Harry waited. "James was not your father by blood." Harry did not move. The wind lifted a strand of his hair and put it down again. He said, "How long have you known?" "Since 1981. James told me himself the week before Halloween. He had wanted to tell me for months and had not had the heart. When he finally told me, he said, and I ask your forgiveness for remembering this exactly, because I remember it exactly, he said, 'The sea gave him to us, and the sea will come back for him one day, and I shall be glad of it and I shall be sad of it, and I wanted you to know so that you knew not to try and stop it.' That was James Potter, Harry. I have not forgotten the words. I have had occasion to consider them often." "The sea," Harry said. "The sea." Harry put his hand in his pocket. He held the two shells. He said, "My mother loved you absolutely. The protection she cast over you was the protection of the mother who bore you, and it held because she was in fact the mother who bore you. The second strand of your protection, which I have wondered about for 13 years and not tested, may be a separate thing entirely. I am not sure, Harry. I am sure enough to tell you today." "Did James know who?" "He did not. Your mother did and did not share the name, and James accepted that as the terms of the secret. She told him only, I think, what he needed to know to love the child without asking for a name to blame. He did not blame." Harry was quiet. "I am told," Dumbledore said, "by a number of small and independent and foolish indicators, that the father was not a man in the ordinary sense. I am told by the fact that you are moving water at 14, without instruction, without incantation. I am told by the fact that the killing curse of the strongest Dark Lord of the modern age rebounded from you, which the love of a mother has been known to deflect, but never, to the best of our histories, to explode. I am told by your mother's own journal, which was left behind in the ruin of Godric's Hollow, and which I have had in my safe keeping, and which I will give to you when you are ready to read it, in which she refers twice, once in English and once in Greek, to a man she met at a cove in Cornwall in the summer of 1979, who fishes only when there is no one to see him, and whose name she wrote down and crossed out and wrote down and crossed out as if the name were a thing she was not allowed to say." Harry's heart very quietly changed pace. "Greek. Your mother read Greek." Harry did not say what he was thinking, which was that of course she did, because he remembered in the fragmentary way he remembered her, a voice reciting something over him at bedtime, a lullaby that had the shape of a language. He said, "Sir, yes. I think I know what you think it is." "I think you do, Harry. Is there a test?" "There is a test. There has always been a test. I have not asked you to take it because once you take it you have no life thereafter in which you do not know. Do you understand me? A boy who has not asked is a boy with one life. A boy who has asked is in a different one, sir. Yes. I took the test before I knew there was a test." Dumbledore looked at him. Harry said. A hose moved, then a glass, then the sea. I didn't ask any of it, it happened, and I held it a bit on purpose. Ah, so I'm already in the other life. Yes. So tell me, Harry said. Dumbledore said, if I am right, and I have spent 12 years trying to be wrong about this, Harry, because if I am right then you are not mine to keep, you never were, and the small kingdom I have tried to build around you for your protection was a kingdom built on sand. If I am right, the man who fathered you was one of the three. The sea, Harry noticed, had gone very quiet. Even the tern had stopped calling. The seal was gone. Which of them? Harry said, and his voice came out in the measured, quiet way that Snape's voice did when Snape did not want anyone to hear a thing he was saying. The sea, Harry. Harry nodded once. I will not, Dumbledore said, presume to tell you what this will mean because I do not know. I will tell you what I know. The Greeks kept their oaths badly. The sons of the sea god have a tradition of being important and of being hunted. The brother of the sea god holds the sky and enforces a particular kind of order and will be, I am sorry to say, unhappy about you. You are already, Harry, the focus of an older and more immediate enemy, who is in my best information currently in Albania. You do not need a second one, and yet I think you have one. Is there a way to test it? Harry said. That leaves Dumbledore's Cornwall in the same shape Dumbledore found it. I have thought about this, Dumbledore said. I have two thoughts. One is that you not test it at all and that we go, after a night's rest, to a safer place and we talk to no one about what I have just told you, and you live as Harry Potter as you have for 13 years, and one day, with my help, we find out in circumstances that we control. And the other is that you go down to the cove alone this afternoon, Dumbledore said, and you put a drop of your blood in the water, and we have our answer. Harry looked at him. Dumbledore looked at the sea. Which one, Harry said, do you want? I want the first. Which one is right? I think the second. Thank you for the honesty, sir. You are welcome. They walked back. The walk back was easier than the walk out. Harry did not try to talk because he discovered, no talk in him, and Dumbledore did not try either because Dumbledore knew when a boy was full. Halfway along the path, a sheep lifted its head and looked at Harry and went, distinctly, sideways. Harry almost laughed. He did not. He walked the last quarter-mile with the sea on his right side and felt, every step, a tiny tug in his chest that was the tide going out. And he knew the way one knows a lullaby, that he could walk into it now and nothing at all would happen to him. When they reached the cottage, Dumbledore squeezed his shoulder and did not say anything and went inside to find Tonks, and Harry went past the cottage and back down the path to the beach. He took Remus's little rope knife out of his pocket. It was Remus's, a sheepshank thing with a thumbnail blade that Remus had lent him that morning to trim the fray off the frayed sash cord on the kitchen window. Harry had not handed it back yet. He was glad now that he hadn't. He walked to the edge of the water. The tide had turned, the shallows were climbing toward the dry line. He knelt. He pushed his right sleeve up to the elbow. He opened the little knife. He drew it across the fleshy pad at the base of his thumb, a short cut, deliberate, not deep. The blood welled in a red bead against his brown skin. He held his hand out over the water. The bead fell. The sea, in a ring 12 feet across, lifted. It did not splash. It did not surge. It rose like bread rising evenly by an inch all around him. And the ring held, not for a second, not for two, for a full long breath. Harry could see the line where the risen water met the unrisen water, a little cliff of a thing. Water cliffs on water, impossible there. The cliffs did not fall. Over the water, like wind but not wind, a voice spoke. It was not his father's voice. It was a woman's, older than mountains, clean as a bell under the sea, and not displeased with him so much as measured, and it said, "Not here, child. Here I cannot shelter you from my husband's brother. Go to the boy. He is your proof and your witness." Harry, crouched in the shallows with a ring of standing water around him and blood on his thumb, said, "Who?" The voice said, I am the wife of your father." The ring of water settled into a single perfect circle and then, slowly, spread outward and was gone, and the tide came in normally, and the red on Harry's thumb had already been drunk and gone. He sat back on the pebbles. He stared at his thumb. He wrapped it in a handkerchief. Amphitrite, he thought. He had read about Amphitrite in the encyclopedia Aunt Petunia had thrown out when Dudley started school because Dudley had torn every letter after M all right. Harry said, aloud to the sea, conversationally, "All right, thank you." He was calm. He was extremely angry in some cold back quarter of himself, where he allowed himself to be angry. Because he did not like being told that he was a marked target by the wife of a father he had not met. And he did not like being told to find a boy, as if the boy were a piece of evidence. And he did not like being in a 14-year-old's body, in which the 14-year-old's parents had left a number of problems that he was having to solve out of order. But the anger did not make his hands shake, and it did not make his voice tremble, and he thanked the sea for being polite and stood up and went back up the path to the cottage, because there was going to be more to this and he was going to have to walk into it. He slept. Remus made fish. That night just before midnight, Harry was woken not by a dream but by a tap on his window. It was not Hedwig. Hedwig was on her perch, 1 foot up, asleep. It was a big crow or a rook or some cousin of rook, with a rolled twist of parchment in its beak. Harry opened the window. The rook dropped the parchment onto the sill and flew without waiting for an owl treat, which the Hogwarts post owls would never have done. Harry unrolled the parchment. The writing was in ink and was unmistakable, because Harry had in his possession, in his trunk, a 2-way mirror and a letter and a Christmas card in precisely this hand. "Harry, I am told not to be here, and I am here anyway. I have watched you go down to the sea today twice, and I have not come closer because I am a man who has asked too many things of you already. I do not know what is happening to you. I know you are not alone. The man who came to see you today knows things that he is only telling you half of. Trust him half, trust yourself all. If you need me, I am in the gorse where you saw me this afternoon, and I am there until you leave. Burn this after. I am sorry, my boy, I love you. Padfoot." Harry read it twice. He did not burn it. He folded it and put it in his trunk with the shells and the blood-stained handkerchief. He looked out of the window across the moonlit bluff at the hollow in the gorse where the black dog had gone, and he thought he saw, not certain, 2 pale eyes looking back. He whispered, "I know, don't come in, they'll be checking the wards at 6, go down the coast by dawn." The pale eyes held him a long second and then lowered and were gone. Harry closed the window, sat on the bed. He did not feel tonight 14. He took a new piece of paper from Remus's writing drawer and a pencil, and he made a second list, smaller and more careful than the first. Things I know. 1. James was not my father. 2. My father was the sea god of the Greeks. 3. Voldemort's curse broke on me because of 2, not only because of Mum. 4. The brother of my father does not want me to live. 5. There is a boy somewhere I am supposed to find. A younger brother. 6. Sirius is here. 7. Dumbledore has known most of this for 13 years and has not told me. Things I need to do. 1. Find the boy. 2. Decide what I am going to tell Ron and Hermione. 3. Do not die between 1 and 2. He looked at the list. He put a small tick next to 7. He did not write the tick. He did it with his eye privately because he was not going to become, he had decided, a boy who wrote bitter things about adults he still needed even if he had earned the right. He was going to become something else. He put the paper back in the drawer. He put both shells under his pillow, side by side. He lay down. In Albania, shortly before the rook landed on Harry's sill, the thin thing in the ruined house was sitting perfectly still and listening. He had been listening, in his way, for several hours. The small bell underwater sound he had learned to follow was not in Surrey anymore. It was moving, which was an interesting fact about the small bell underwater sound, because it had not moved in 13 years before this month. It was moving west and south at a speed greater than any small bell underwater sound had any right to manage. The thin thing smiled. Avery was already on a boat under a false name, crossing the Atlantic. Avery was going to Manhattan. The Potter boy was going, it seemed, in the same direction. So much the better. 2 pieces of the same broken plate picked up off the floor at once. Even Wormtail, whose mind was slow, would approve. The thin thing hissed something in a language that was not parcel tongue, and for a half-second his eyes flickered from their red to a crackling, alarmed, skyborn white, and he blinked them back and did not remark. At sea, a long way from Albania, a man in a fisherman's jumper sat on a pier that did not exist. He put his hand on the water, and the water stilled around his palm. A small boy in a hoodie was eating peanut butter out of a jar in an apartment in Manhattan, and had just told his mother, through a mouthful of it, that he thought he saw a lady on the ferry that afternoon with eyes on her hat. Sally Jackson, ironing at the other end of the little sitting room, paused with the iron lifted. She put it down. She said, "Percy, come and sit with me," and Percy came and sat with her, and she held him under her arm for a minute while he chewed. "Mum," he said. "It's all right, honey," she said. "You're safe." She did not say, not for long, she did not have to say it. She already knew in some tired, waiting way she had known all 12 years of her son's life that not for long was coming. She did not know yet that it had arrived. Over her son's head she closed her eyes and said, silently, to appear that she remembered perfectly, "I kept him as long as I could." In Cornwall, Harry Potter fell asleep with his cheek on a pillow under which lay 2 seashells, and in his sleep he dreamed of the boy in the dark blue hoodie again. And this time the boy had a name, or almost had one, and the name started with a P. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Manhattan in the end, it cost a letter from Dumbledore, and a favor called in from Kingsley Shacklebolt, and 2 mornings of Tonks arguing with the International Portkey office, in a voice of sweet, unhurried menace, which Harry enjoyed watching from the kitchen door with a mug of tea in his hand. By Tuesday afternoon Harry had 2 sheets of parchment stamped with the gold roundel of the ministry's travel wing, a Portkey home in the shape of a commemorative teaspoon, a second shirt and a clean pair of socks in a small rucksack, and Remus Lupin at his elbow, looking no more rested than he ever looked, but looking, for the first time Harry had seen since the shack, interested. Dumbledore had not come to see them off. Dumbledore had given Harry, in the kitchen on Monday night, a slip of paper with a name on it, Sally Jackson. "You did not get the name from me," Dumbledore had said. "I got it a long time ago from somebody who had no business giving me anything, and I kept it. I have kept a number of things, Harry, and I am growing shy of keeping any more. Use it kindly." Harry had put the paper in his pocket next to the shells. "Sir," he said. "Yes, Harry. Thank you. For what exactly?" "For letting me decide." Dumbledore had looked at him over his half-moons and had, for a moment, looked old. "I am very tired, Harry," he had said, "of deciding for you. You are a brighter boy than my generation wants you to be. It will cost you. But it is better than the other thing." That had been Monday. On Tuesday afternoon, the Portkey was an old, dinged metal lunchbox with the words "Departures INT" on the bottom and a hook-like sensation that caught in Harry's navel and pulled. And when his feet touched stone again, he was in a hot, dim antechamber that smelled of pretzels, overhead strip lights humming, and an American witch with a clipboard who said, "Welcome to the Department of Magical Arrivals. Have a nice day next." Before he had steadied, and Remus, half pivoting, caught his elbow and said, "Welcome to Manhattan." They stepped out through a swinging door into a Duane Reade off 7th Avenue, and into the full, unmistakable, unsubtle sound of New York in late afternoon in summer, which was the sound, Harry thought, of approximately 5,000 simultaneous arguments, none of them his. He loved it instantly. He did not say so to Remus. Remus was trying to blend in as a well-preserved shabby English academic and failing in a mild, dignified way. Remus had a map. Remus had, of all things, an Amex card. "Dumbledore," Remus said when Harry looked at the card. "Don't ask. Breakfast is on it, cab's on it. I will sleep in the hotel room and not emerge by arrangement. You have 48 hours, Harry, and I want you back at that hotel on Thursday by 3 in the afternoon." "Agreed. If you need me, send the owl. She's at the hotel in her cage. She'll know." "She will." Remus squeezed his shoulder, which Harry was still not used to from any adult except lately Dumbledore, and turned away into a yellow cab with the first of the evening rush already thickening around them. And Harry stood on 7th Avenue with a folded sheet of paper that said Sally Jackson, 105A East 104th Street, and the shells in his pocket. And he thought, "All right, Potter," and walked to the subway. He did not go to the apartment. Not the first day. He wanted to see the boy first without the mother's eyes on him. He took the 2 train uptown until the signal went funny and he got off at a random stop and went up the stairs and into a neighborhood that smelled of dust and hot tar. He asked 3 people before one of them, a man in a coverall smoking outside a bodega, said, "Yancey, you're gonna want a bus, or a cab, or not to go to Yancey. They let out in a week. Why you going there?" "Checking on someone," Harry said. The man laughed and said, "Boarding school kid," and pointed at a bus stop. The bus let him off at a gate with a sign that said YANCY Academy in faded gold on a green stone arch, and a gravel drive that curled up between trees older than the gate. It was a boys' school. Harry had seen similar in the south of England. He did not go up the drive. He walked the perimeter along an iron-railed fence until he was at the back of the grounds, where the fence gave onto a slope down to a little creek, and he jumped the fence at a quiet spot, and he went along the creek until it broadened into a pond near the back of the main building, and he sat on a flat stone half in the water and half out. He put his hand in the pond, not to do anything, to listen. The water was warm on the top, cooler 6 inches down, and it had the slow breath of pond water, which he had not known until today had a breath. He sat there for some time with his hand under the surface and let the breath come in him. Somewhere in the trees a bell rang, 3 rings, the sort of bell that schools rang at the end of the day. Boys in short-sleeved shirts began to spill down the drive to the gate and into town and up toward the dining hall, and Harry sat very still where he sat, with his hand in the water, and waited. He did not have a photograph of Percy Jackson. He had a dream. When Percy came past, Harry knew. Percy Jackson came around the side of the main building in a dark blue hoodie that was a size too big and a pair of jeans with the knees out, with a rucksack on one shoulder and a battered paperback in his hand, reading and walking at the same time and getting it slightly wrong. He was 11, Harry thought, maybe just 12, black-haired, an inch shorter than Harry had been at that age, with the wiry build of a kid who ran a lot without meaning to. He looked up from his book as he passed the pond for no particular reason, and his eyes went to Harry sitting on the flat stone. They were the same eyes, not similar, not close. The same eyes Harry had seen in his own mother's photographs once or twice in a bright light, and the same eyes Harry saw on the dim, blurry surface of any kettle he'd looked into for the last month. Sea green, not pretty green or leaf green. Serve green. Percy stopped. "Hey," Percy said. "Hey," Harry said. "You don't go here. Number, are you lost?" "I'm from England," Harry said, which was the kind of thing he could usually get away with because people from the east coast of the United States forgave in an English voice almost anything. "Are you here to steal something?" "Number, why are you at our pond then?" "I like ponds." Percy considered him. "Fair enough," Percy said. He sat down, not too close, on the same flat stone 10 inches away. "You've got your hand in our pond." "Yes. You're a weird English kid." "I get that a lot," Percy laughed. It was a full, surprised, unself-conscious laugh, the laugh of a boy who had not yet learned that laughter put you in somebody else's crosshairs. Harry liked him immediately. Liked him with the quick, quiet, fierce liking of somebody who had not, in fact, had a blood-relative laugh at something he said in his whole memory. Harry had had friends. Harry had had people who were like family. He had not had this. "I'm Harry," Harry said. "Percy." They shook hands, solemnly, half-joking, two boys on a stone over a pond. Percy said, "You want to see something?" Harry, interested. "Yeah." Percy took the paperback out and rolled it up to keep it dry, and he put his right hand flat on the water. The pond rippled, not in rings, in a spiral, a neat, tight, clockwise little spiral that drew itself around his palm and sat there spinning for as long as he kept his hand still. Percy's face went odd, a flicker of wanting to show off and a flicker of knowing he shouldn't, and a flicker of hoping that the weird English kid wasn't going to run away. Harry did not run away. Harry, very quietly, put his own hand flat on the water an arm's length from Percy's. A second spiral drew itself counterclockwise around Harry's palm. They looked at each other. Percy's mouth opened. He said, "Holy yeah. How did you? I mean, I've always." Percy looked at his hand as if his hand had betrayed him by being interesting at this moment. "It happens sometimes. I try not to do it. My mom says not to." "Mrs. Dodds, don't worry about Mrs. Dodds. Anyway, I try to keep my hand out of water at school mostly because hey, it's still going." "Yes." Percy took his hand off the surface. His spiral slowed and sighed itself into stillness. Harry left his where it was. His spiral kept turning, a private wheel. "You're like me," Percy said. He sounded in the same breath hungry and terrified. "Looks like." Are you I don't know. What are you?" Harry thought. He had never told a non-wizard the word witch or wizard. He had had it drilled into him from first year that he must not. He had lived in a household for 13 years in which the word was sworn off. Sitting on a flat stone at Yancey Academy with a half-brother he had not yet called a brother and whose spiral was still a ghost in the water, Harry looked at Percy Jackson and felt the way open. "I'm a wizard," Harry said. Sort of. It's complicated. I'm sort of a wizard and sort of something else. So are you." "I'm not a wizard." You're the other thing." "What's the other thing?" "Do you know anything about Greek gods, Percy?" Percy blinked. "I fail Greek. My teacher's on me about it, Miss Vasquez." "Why?" "Because," Harry said carefully, I think you and I have the same dad, and I think he's one of them." Percy stared at him. It was not the stare of a boy who thought the English kid was mad. It was the stare, Harry recognized, of a boy who had been waiting most of his short life for somebody to tell him a thing, and who now that the thing had been told was trying to fit it through a door in his brain that was too narrow for it. Harry had made that face at Dumbledore a day ago. He recognized it because he had watched himself make it in the dark little shaving mirror in the Cornwall cottage afterwards. "Greek gods," Percy said slowly. "Greek. Like the one with which one do you want? Not Zeus. Not Zeus, the other one, with the trident." Percy's face went through 3 colors. He did not say anything for a while. He put his hand in the water again, and the little spiral came up to meet his fingers the way a pet came up. He said very quietly, "Mom knows, doesn't she?" "I think so. I'm going to her. I'd like it if you came." Percy said, I've got homework. Miss Vasquez will. She's been mean to me all year, and she's been meaner lately, actually. I thought it was because I'm bad at Greek, but she told me yesterday I couldn't leave after finals until I sat with her and did a makeup test on a field trip. I thought that was weird. Harry's attention sharpened. "Mrs. Dodds is the other one you were going to say." "Yeah." "Are either of them, I don't know how to ask this, are either of them off? Like there's something wrong about how they look at you?" "Mrs. Dodds, yeah, always. Miss Vasquez this month. She's gone, scaly around the ears." Harry filed scaly around the ears in a pocket of his mind he had been trying to keep empty. He said, "Get your bag, I'll walk you out, we'll go see your mum." Now, tomorrow they may not let you out of the gate." Percy stood up. He was not a boy who stalled, Harry saw. Once he had decided a thing, he went. "My friend Grover's here," Percy said, shouldering the bag. "I need to tell him I'm going, or he'll—" "Grover can wait," Harry said, because he had a ripple in his back that he had not had 2 minutes ago, and a ripple in his back had got to be listened to today. "Come." They went out the back gate, around the long way. Harry kept his wand up his sleeve under the windproof cuff of his jacket, loose, not drawn, but there. The afternoon had turned a pale gray that was not a summer color. Harry had been in summer twice already this year, and summer in England after rain had a gray like this, which meant nothing. Summer in Manhattan, which had no business having this gray, meant something. They took the bus back to the subway. On the bus, Percy said, "Are you going to tell me your last name?" "Potter." "Percy Potter," Percy said, testing it. "Harry Potter, Percy Jackson." He didn't say the other thing because the other thing, Evans, or whatever he had been before he was Potter, was a thing he wasn't ready to say aloud yet. Percy accepted this. "Harry Potter," Percy said. "Do people in England know you?" Harry looked at him sideways. "Some, a bit." "Are you famous?" "A bit." "Like how famous?" "Like, don't tell anyone my name until I tell you it's okay." "Oh," Percy thought. "Okay." Harry loved him. He was trying not to, because loving somebody whose life you were about to drop a rock into was irresponsible, but he was losing the fight. He had spent 3 years loving Ron and Hermione, which was a love that had been given to him by the chance of a compartment in a bookshop. He had had Sirius given to him by a mistake in a prison. The boy sitting on this bus with him, reading the overhead adverts with his lips moving, had been given to him by a god. That had a different weight. They changed at 96th. They came up at 96th and Broadway, and Percy led him east on foot because Percy said the crosstown buses made his head hurt. They crossed into an island of brick and sycamore and bodega awnings and kids on bikes. Percy turned a corner onto 104th Street and said, "It's the one with the window box." The one with the window box was 3 stories up, and the window box had a single drooping basil plant in it that had not been watered in a week. Percy dug in his bag for keys. "Tell me first," Harry said, "what your mum does so I know what to expect." "She's a writer," Percy said. "Or she wants to be. She works at a candy shop most days. She was married to this guy Gabe for a while. He was the worst. She left him back in the spring. She's been better since. She's still tired a lot." "What kind of candy shop?" "Sweet on America off 72nd. Blue gummy bears mostly. She brings home the wonky ones." "Percy." "Yeah. Does your mum cook with anything blue?" "Why, I just want to know." "Blue pancakes Sunday mornings always." Harry allowed himself a small breath that was almost a grin. He did not know why, but the existence of Sunday blue pancakes was the most reassuring fact anyone had given him in weeks. They went up the 3 flights. Percy opened the door. Mom, I brought somebody." Sally Jackson was at the kitchen table in the one-room apartment with a pair of half-moon reading glasses on her nose and a red pen in her hand, and a stack of typescript pages in front of her. And she looked up at the sound of her son's voice with a little welcoming smile that was a practiced welcoming smile. The welcoming smile of a mother whose son sometimes brought home boys from school. And her smile stopped the second she saw who was standing behind Percy at the door. Her face went white. Her lips moved. She did not make a sound. She put the pen down. She stood up. She stood for a second at the table as if the table were the only thing keeping her upright, and then she came around the table. Harry watched her come. Percy, half turning, looked from Harry to his mother and back and said, "Mom," in a small voice. Sally Jackson came up to Harry without stopping, and she put her hands on his face, one on each cheek, and she looked at him from 4 inches away with tears in her eyes that had not yet got to the crying part, and she said, in the quietest voice he'd ever been spoken to in by an adult, "Oh, oh my, oh," she said, "how are you alive?" "A lot of luck," Harry said evenly. She laughed. It broke and became a sob and then became a laugh again. She said, "You are taller than I thought. You have a scar. Your mother's scar was on her knee from our fishing boat when we were little. Did you know that? You have her chin." "Oh, sweetheart," Percy said. Mom, who?" Sally took her hands off Harry's face. She turned to her son. She crouched a little, not much, just enough to put their eyes level, and she said, "Percy, this is Percy. This is your brother." "I gathered," Percy said, and then the gathering caught up with the hearing, and his face did a whole weather system in 10 seconds, and he sat down on the doormat and said, "Oh, okay," and put his head on his knees. Harry came and sat down on the doormat next to him. Sally sat down with them. In the little hallway of the one-room apartment in 105A East 104th Street, with the basil drooping on the sill and a stack of typescript on the table and a kettle about to boil, 3 people sat on a doormat like people sitting at a grave or a cradle, and nobody said anything for a little while, and it was all right. Then Sally Jackson said, "I have cookies. Come in, both of you." "Mom, cookies first, Percy, cookies first. Then we'll go through this properly." They went in. Harry took his shoes off at the door, not because anyone had asked, but because his mother, whom he barely remembered, had done the same at the doors of other people's houses in his single memory of her knee, and he had kept it. Sally gave them chocolate chip cookies and blue-tinted milk, and she sat across from them at the table with her pen and her typescript pushed aside, and she put her hands flat on the wood and she said, "Let me do this in the right order. Harry, you are Harry, yes. Your mother was a friend of mine when we were girls. I was 8 and she was 11, and our families both went to a little house in Montauk every July. We used to swim. She was the best swimmer I ever saw. The summer she was 16 she met him. I met him the summer I was 17, long after her, different year, same place. He talked about her like she was a beloved sister. I didn't understand then. I understand now. We didn't compare notes. Young women don't compare notes about men like him. But he told me once, he said there had been somebody before me. There had been a boy. He said he didn't know what had happened to the boy. He was sorry about the boy. He said, she paused. Her hands tightened on the wood. He said the boy's mother had been killed, and that he could feel something of the boy still, and that he could not find him, and that he was afraid to look too hard because looking hard would attract attention from a brother of his who didn't like him. Percy said, "Mom, I know, Percy. That's me. That is you, yes, sweetheart." She turned her face to Harry. "And this is the boy." Harry said, "The boy is me." "Yes." Harry was glad he had already cried himself out quietly in a bathroom in Cornwall, because he did not have any left for this, and he was also glad he had not, because something new was sitting in his chest, warm and a little sore and not entirely safe, and it was making him pay attention in a way he had not paid attention to anything in 2 weeks. He said, "Do you know his name?" Sally said, "Yes." Percy said, "I know his name. I think I know his name. I'm scared to say it." Harry said, "Don't say it out loud then. Just nod once if it's the one I'm thinking of." Sally nodded once. Percy, after a long breath, nodded once. Harry put his hand on the table. He turned his palm up. Percy put his hand on Harry's. Sally put hers on Percy's. The 3 hands made a small stack in the middle of a table in Manhattan, and in the little basement of the building under their feet the boiler, a cranky brownstone boiler that had not been right since Nixon, wheezed once and settled and found, without any human intervention, its correct pressure and ran clean. Sally lifted her head. Her eyes had gone sharp. "Was that you?" she said, not to Percy, to Harry. I don't think so. Something just fixed the boiler. Maybe you have a good boiler." "I know what a good boiler sounds like, Harry Potter, and I know what the other thing sounds like. That was the other thing. Listen, hear the pipes. They're singing." They were singing. A very faint, clean, uniform hum up and down the wall, like a single note struck on a distant bell and sustained. Percy looked up at the radiator by the kitchen window. The radiator was vibrating with it. "Mom," Percy said, "I've been making that noise since I was 5. I know, sweetheart. It gets louder when I'm happy, kind of. I know. It's louder than usual. Yes, Harry said, something smelled us. Sally looked at him. Sorry, Harry said. I've been in, you learn to think in those terms where I come from. Something that can smell people like us. I think the two of us in the same room, it's making a noise. A noise that anyone who can listen for it is now hearing. Sally closed her eyes. She said, Okay, then we need to, Harry. Where are you staying? A hotel with my teacher, Remus. A teacher, a friend, it's all right. He knows some of this. I can bring him. Bring him. Tonight, please. Harry said, All right. Sally stood up. She went to the kitchen drawer and brought out a little cloth bag that had seen a good deal of use, and she opened it and took out 3 small pebbles, perfectly gray, perfectly round, and she laid one on the windowsill, one on the doormat, and one on the threshold between her room and the main room. She said as she laid them. He gave them to me before I had Percy. He said they were for bad weather. I haven't used them. I don't know how. May I? Harry said. Please. Harry put his hand above the pebble on the windowsill. He did not say anything. He did not do anything. He just let the want in his chest, that Percy be safe, that Sally be safe, that the thing listening to them in the pipes be politely invited to shut up, reach down through the floorboards to the East River 3 blocks off and climb back up through the plumbing into the pebble at the window. The pebble's gray went a shade deeper. A faint silver line traced itself around it and stayed. He did the same for the other 2. Sally watched. She did not say anything until it was finished. Then she said, How long have you been able to do that? About a month. A month. I'm a quick study. I believe that, Sally said, and she crossed her arms over her chest in what was not hugging herself so much as holding herself together, and she said, Go, get your teacher. Bring him here. Don't speak to strangers. Take the cabs on the avenues, not the ones that crawl up on you. Percy, stay put. Mom, I stay put, Percy. Yes, Mom. Harry at the door paused. He turned back. Sally. Yes, Harry. Thank you for the cookies. She looked at him. She said, Oh, honey, for cookies. And Harry Potter, aged 14, went back down the 3 flights of a walk-up in Manhattan with his brother's sugar in his mouth and the hum of pipes in his heels. And he was not afraid, which was a new way to be on a staircase, and he rather liked it. 3 streets away, in the shadow of a delivery bay between 2 dumpsters, a man who had crossed an ocean on a freighter under another name stepped out of the shadow, tucked a long, knobbled stick up his sleeve, and followed at a careful distance. His eyes were very slightly yellow at the edges, the way a poorly made glamour goes yellow after a sea crossing, and there was a snake tattoo on his wrist that moved slightly on its own. Avery had found him. Chapter 3. In Chapter 4, Thunder over the Hudson. Remus did not argue. This was the thing Harry would remember about him, Harry decided, on the cab ride back uptown with the lights of Madison Square Garden sliding past the window and Remus next to him in his old wool jacket with his hands folded in his lap. Remus did not waste words. Harry had said, in the lobby of the cheap hotel on 8th Avenue, I've found him. The boy. I'm taking you to meet his mother now, and Remus had nodded once, picked up his wand and his coat and an ordinary leather wallet from the bedside table and said, Right, cab. In the cab, Remus said, Have you eaten? Cookies. That's a no then. It's a partial. Did you tell anyone? Sally, the mother, she knew already. She knew there was me. She didn't know who I was. She was. Harry tried for a word and didn't find a small enough one and used a big one instead. Grace, Remus. She was Grace about it. That's a kind of luck, Remus said. Yes. You felt the call when you saw him. Yes. Remus looked at him sideways. All right, Harry, tell me the rest at the door. We'll handle it as it comes. Harry leaned his head against the window and watched Manhattan smear by in the wet evening. The afternoon's gray had broken over Long Island Sound somewhere east of them and was now back, cleaner, with the underedge of cloud that meant rain in the morning. Harry thought about the pipes singing in Sally's apartment. He thought about pebbles. He thought about the fact that he had let himself love a boy in 20 minutes and what that was going to cost him, and whether it would be a survivable cost. He thought as the cab turned onto 104th about his wand. He moved it from his sleeve to his pocket, hilt up, in the way Mad-Eye Moody had once told a class of 7-year-olds at a ministry safety day that you should do at the start of any evening you would be on a strange street. Harry had been 7. He had not been to a ministry safety day. He didn't know where the memory had come from. He took the wand out of his pocket and back into his sleeve and decided to trust himself. They went up the 3 flights. Sally Jackson opened the door before Harry had knocked. She had put a kettle on and changed her shirt and put a comb through her hair and washed the typescript ink off her hands, which Harry recognized, because he had done versions of all those small things every September on the last morning of the holiday, and they were the rituals of a person preparing to be a good host to a moment they were terrified of. She said, "Mr. Lupin." "Remus, please." "Mrs. Jackson." "Sally, come in." Percy was on the couch with a mug of cocoa and his hood up and his eyes huge, and he stood up when they came in and put out his hand to Remus like a small grown-up, and Remus gravely shook it. "Percy, sir." "Don't sir me, I'm not Snape." Remus glanced at Harry. "Tell him I'm not Snape." "You're not Snape," Harry said. Percy looked at his mother as if for translation. Sally said, sit down, all of you please, don't stand." "The kettle's just." The kettle whistled. Sally went to the kettle. She poured tea. The pipes in the wall were still singing, faint, high, unwavering, like a wineglass under a wet finger. Harry watched Remus's face when Remus first heard them. Remus looked at the wall. Remus looked at Harry. Remus said very quietly, "Yes, all right, yes." Sally brought the tea. They sat, Sally in the armchair, Remus and Percy at the table, Harry on the arm of the couch where he could see the window and the door and both of them, and they began. Remus did most of the saying. Sally did some of the saying. Harry did very little of the saying because he was looking at the window. The pipes were getting louder. Not by much. A faint, unmistakable creep of louder every minute, the way a tide came in. Sally was telling Remus about the summer she was 17 at Montauk, and Remus was nodding, and Percy was holding his mother's hand on the table, and the pipes were getting louder, and the basil on the sill, that scrap of a half-dead basil plant, had perked up 2 leaves. Harry stood up. "Remus," he said. Remus stopped mid-sentence. "Get them in the inner room." Now. Remus did not argue again. Remus had the wand out before he was on his feet. "Sally, Percy, through here please, all the way back." Sally had her hand on Percy's wrist already. Percy was already on his feet. Whatever a 12-year-old at the start of his troubles was, Percy Jackson at the start of his was not slow. They went through the kitchen toward the bedroom, and Harry took 2 paces past them to the front door, and the front door rattled. It did not knock. It rattled like wood under a hand looking for a way through wood. Harry put his palm flat against the inside of the door. He thought, listen. The water in the radiator behind him, the one that had been faintly humming all evening, gave him a complete picture of what stood on the landing, in the way a calm pond gives you the picture of a fish that swims through it. There was a man on the landing. The man was not a man. The man was wearing a man was the closest the radiator could get to it. The wearing was thin tonight from the salt of the freighter, and the thing inside the wearing was a magic Harry had only ever felt at one remove before, in the stinging little flicker that came off Slytherin's 6th years in the corridor. Death Eater, then. Not a god, not a monster, a wizard. Harry was, for 1 second, sharply relieved. He could fight a wizard. He drew his wand. He looked over his shoulder and saw that Remus had Sally and Percy at the inner door, that the inner door was already half shut, and that Remus had his wand up, white-faced, listening too, not through the radiator, because Remus did not have radiators in his ear, but through 3 years of defense training and 20 more in a war. Harry said in a voice perfectly level, "Avery, isn't it?" There was a silence on the landing that was not the silence of a confused stranger. Then the rattling stopped. A voice through the door, English, well-bred, used to being obeyed. How polite. Hello, Potter. Get out of this building, Harry said. That's not what I'm here for. I know what you're here for. Get out. You really should let me in. I'd rather not damage the place. Try. Avery laughed, a short, bored, professional laugh, and the door went. It did not shatter. Harry was watching closely. The door simply ceased to exist. 1 second wood. Next second air, and a wave of the kind of dry hot static that blew Harry's hair backwards. Avery, in the gray-yellow glamour of a tired hex, stepped over the threshold with a long, knobbled wand in his right hand, and a small, pleased smile on his mouth. His first spell came in over Harry's head. Harry was not where it expected him to be. Harry had dropped to one knee a half-second before the door went, because he had felt the spell shape forming in the boards under his feet, and the spell hit the radiator behind him and the radiator cracked. Cold water poured from it onto the floor. That was when Harry stopped being polite. He flicked his wand sideways. The puddle spreading from the radiator did not become a stunning charm, it became a hand. A flat, wet, thin-fingered hand of water that came up off the floor, a foot tall, and slapped Avery across the side of the face. Avery's head snapped sideways, and he made the kind of noise grown men do not like to make in front of children, and Harry was already moving on his feet to the side of the doorway, wand up, mouth shut. Avery's second spell was reductor and was meant for Harry's chest, and Harry saw it coming, and the puddle on the floor between them rose into a wall and absorbed it, and the wall collapsed back into puddle and ran a foot up Avery's trousers. Avery froze. Trick, he said with a kind of admiring snarl. Cute trick. Wait till I've practiced, Harry said. He did the next thing because he wanted Avery off balance for 2 more seconds, and that was all he needed. He flicked his wand and the kettle on the kitchen counter boiled over of its own accord and dumped a foot of steam between them. Avery cursed and put up an arm, and behind the steam, Harry took 3 running steps to the bedroom door and yanked it open. Out the fire escape, he said to Sally. Now, Remus with them. Harry, now Remus, please. He's going to bring the whole landing down, and it's not safe to be in the building when he does. There's a park 3 blocks east. Go to the park. Stay near the water. I'll meet you. Harry, go. Remus did the only thing he could do, which was the thing Harry had told him to. He took Sally and Percy out the bedroom window. The fire escape clanged in the alley. Harry shut the bedroom door behind them and turned back to face the steam in his front room. Avery was through the steam. His glamour had slipped further. He was under it, a man who had been handsome in the way Death Eaters had been handsome in 1979, and was, in 1994, not. He had a snake tattoo crawling on his wrist and a mark on his forearm under the cuff. He had his wand up. He had figured out in 2 seconds that the boy in front of him had inherited not just the witch's protection, but a thing that no other Potter had ever had access to. He wanted Harry alive. This was the only fact that was on Harry's side. Harry started backing toward the front door. Avery followed. You're very good, Avery said, and meant it. You'll be wasted at 14. Come quietly. The Dark Lord will be very kind to you. Your aunt, I am sorry to say, was an obstacle and is not breathing tonight. We will not be obstacles to one another. You killed my aunt. I was efficient. I was also under instructions to not kill the boy at the same address. I extracted him for transport. He is in a van at the corner of 96th and Lex with 2 of my colleagues. Harry stopped backing. He had a moment in which he had to choose, and he chose fast because if he chose slow, Avery would parse his face and step in between the truth, which would tell Avery he cared, and the lie, which would buy him 3 seconds. You took my cousin. Yes. What use is my cousin? None, probably. We were going to use him to ask you very nicely to come with us. Now I see that what we should have done was take a brother. Harry did not flinch. I don't have a brother. Don't you? Avery watched him. Avery's eyes flicked to the bedroom door behind Harry and to the window beyond and to the fire escape clanging in the alley and then back to Harry. And Harry knew by the way Avery's mouth changed that Avery had heard the fire escape and had known what it meant. Harry said, very quietly, "All right." Then Harry did three things at once. He spoke a wandless thing he had not known until tonight that he could speak. Water came up under Avery's feet from the bathroom 3 feet away, and Avery slipped, hard, his knee striking the floor with a noise that was a wet snap. He pointed his wand at the front window and said, "Confringo," softly, and the window blew outward over the street, no broken glass falling on the boys below. And he ran. He ran past the falling Avery and out the broken-down front door, two-stepping down the stairs with his hand on the rail, and he was out of the building and running east on 104th faster than a 14-year-old in trainers had any business running. Behind him in the apartment, Avery cursed and got up. Avery did not chase Harry on the stairs. Avery used the front window because Avery was a Death Eater and could fly without a broom in a pinch. And the pinch was on. He drifted out of the front window like a man stepping off a curb and turned in the air and looked east, and saw the boy in the trainers and went. 3 blocks east was Central Park. Sally and Percy and Remus were already in it. They were not at the entrance. Remus had had the sense to take them in over the wall. Remus had levitated Sally and dragged Percy by the wrist, and the 3 of them were standing in a copse beside a fountain that fed into a long ornamental pond. Remus had his wand up. Harry came over the wall after them at a dead run, breath ragged, scar throbbing, and he reached them and bent at the waist for 1 second and straightened and said, "He's coming." "Avery. He's not a man, Remus, he's a Death Eater. He's good. He thinks Percy's Dudley." Remus said, "What?" "He took my cousin from Surrey. He thinks Percy is never mind. Percy, listen to me." Percy was very pale, but Percy was paying attention. Harry said, "I want you to put your hand on the pond." "Why?" "Because I am going to do something I have only ever done in my head, and it is going to take both of us." Percy did not ask another question. Percy went to the edge of the pond and put his hand on it. The pond, which had been a quiet evening pond with 1 duck on it, woke up like a dog at a knock. Avery came over the wall. He landed 30 feet from them in the gravel and brushed himself down and lifted his wand. He had a satisfied, cool look on his face that Harry had seen on Lucius Malfoy in the flue grate of a shop. He was a man who had decided that the inconvenience of the chase was over and the easy part was about to begin. He was a man who was very wrong. Harry put his hand on the pond next to Percy's. Percy, 11.5 years old and standing under an unfamiliar sky in Central Park with a wand pointed at his chest, looked at his brother, and Harry looked back at him, and Harry said, "On 3. 3 what?" "Up, up. Just think it. Think the pond up with me." Avery raised his wand. His mouth opened around the first syllable of a curse Harry recognized by its shape. 3, Harry said. The pond came up. It rose like a building, not a wave, a wall. 12 feet of water, the entire surface of the ornamental pond and the ornamental pond's first foot of depth, rose into the air and held for 1 eternal second in a sheet that caught the streetlights in 1,000 fragments and looked, Harry thought distantly, like a window into another country. Avery's curse, half-spoken, hit the sheet and was eaten. Avery's mouth was still open when the sheet folded slowly and closed over him. He did not have time to scream. The water was not gentle. It had picked up everything in the pond, pebbles, weed, a single broken bottle, a goldfish, and it had put all of that into the closing motion. Avery went under the water and the water held him under, and Harry, his hand still on the pond's bank, his other hand at Percy's shoulder, said, very quietly, "Keep him there. Don't kill him, just hold." Percy nodded. The water held. Avery's wand floated up to the surface. Avery's hand came up after it once, and Harry stepped over and took Avery's wand out of the water as you would lift a stick out of a stream. He waited a careful 3 more seconds. Then he said to Percy, "Let him have air." The water gave Avery air. It did not let him out. It let him have a head, 4 inches of head, no shoulders, no arms, no spell casting, no glamour. Avery's face in the moonlight was very white and very wet. Harry looked at him from the bank. "You came to the wrong country, Avery," Harry said. I know what I am. You don't. Your master is going to have to start guessing, isn't he? Tell him from me. Tell him my cousin had better be in his bed at Privet Drive by morning, or I'll find every one of you, and I'll do this in a place where there isn't an Auror to stop me. There's no Auror here. Remus beside him, who had been silent through the whole thing because Remus had recognized the moment a teacher was supposed to step out of the way, raised his wand. 3 quick, complicated movements. A silver phoenix burst out of the tip of his wand and shot up over the trees and was gone northeast at speed. "Magical Congress," Remus said. "They're Aurors, 8 to 10 minutes. Tell them yourself then," Harry said to Avery, "if they don't kill you first." He turned away. The water did not turn away. The water held Avery in a perfect shoulder-deep pool where he stood, mute, broken-kneed, beaten by a 14-year-old wizard who hadn't drawn a recognized dueling spell. That was when the sky said number. Harry felt it before it happened. He felt it through the soles of his trainers and through the back of his neck and through the wet hand on his shoulder that was suddenly Percy's hand. The air over the pond changed pressure. The goldfish, which had been wisely floating sideways under the surface to wait this out, dove. The duck on the far side of the pond went silently into the air and was gone. Percy said, "Harry, get down." "What, down, now?" Harry pulled Percy to the gravel. Remus hit the gravel half a second after them. Sally was already on the gravel because Sally was a mother, and mothers had a head start on this kind of thing. The bolt did not come down vertically. It came down along the line of the pond, a sideways hissing fork that picked the highest conductive point in the immediate area and went for it. The highest conductive point was Avery's wet head sticking out of the water. It struck. It earthed. The pond exploded, not the way a pipe explodes, the way a candle goes out, except in 3 directions at once. There was a single sound that was beyond noise, a flash that left a violet ghost on the inside of Harry's eyes for a full minute, and then there was nothing in the bowl of the pond at all. No water, no Avery, no goldfish. The walking path next to it had cracked in 3 places. The trees on the near side had had their leaves stripped. Harry's hair was standing up like a hedge. Sally said, "Oh my God." Percy said, "Harry." Harry sat up. He felt under his hand for Percy's hand and found it. He squeezed it hard. Percy squeezed back. "You're all right," Harry said. "You're all right," Percy said. I'm all right." He stood up. He helped Percy up. He helped Remus up, and Remus was bleeding from a cut on his forehead from the gravel, and Remus was looking not at the empty pond but at the sky. That, Remus said slowly, was not a Death Eater. "No," Harry said, "that was a god. Yes. He was aiming at you." "He was aiming at me," Harry said. "And Percy, he was aiming at the both of us." Remus pressed the back of his hand to the cut on his head. He looked at Sally. He looked at the 2 boys standing close together at the edge of an empty pond, soaked, Percy in his too big hoodie, Harry with his trousers torn to the knee. "Right," Remus said. "We need to leave New York tonight." "We're not leaving." "Harry, we're going to her place," Harry said. "We're getting her bag and Percy's bag, and we're going to a place where they can't strike." "Sally, is there a place you've been told about?" By him. Sally Jackson, who had been sitting on the gravel with her hands flat on it as if she could feel through the grit for the right answer, lifted her head. "There is," she said. "He told me. Long Island, a camp. You go up the Long Island Sound to the North Shore off Route 25A. There's a strawberry farm. It's not a strawberry farm. He said only if I had to. He said it in the only voice I ever heard him use that wasn't joking. "Then we go," Harry said. "Tonight. Tonight." Sally, who was a woman who kept her keys in the same drawer as her measuring spoons, who paid her electric bill on the 2nd of the month, who had spent 12 years not taking her son to a camp on Long Island that her ex-lover, the sea god, had told her about because she had wanted, for 12 years, the mortal life as long as it would stretch, said, "Yes, all right, yes, I have a car." "You have a car?" "It's old, I keep it for emergencies. It's in a garage on 88th, it's a Camaro." It was never mind whose. It was a gift. It runs. Harry did not laugh, but he wanted to. The world he was finding had a sense of humor about heroes. Of course, Poseidon's old girlfriend had been gifted a Camaro and had kept it 12 years for a reason she had not been able to put into words. Sirens were starting in the streets. Remus said, "Oars will be here in 3 minutes. We go now or we are stuck explaining why Harry Potter is in the middle of a thunderstrike in Central Park, and the answer to that question is one I would rather not give the American ministry." "Walking out the South Side," Harry said. "Walking out the South Side." They walked out the South Side. Halfway across the bridge over the carriage road, Percy reached up and took Harry's hand. He did not look up. He did not say anything. He held it. Harry held back, with the wand still in his other hand and the borrowed wand of a dead Death Eater in his pocket and the warm shells against his thigh. Percy said, very quietly, into the dark and the sirens behind them, "Brother." Harry said, "Yes, you're my brother. Yes, okay." They got to 88th Street as the first thunderhead, properly this time, broke over the river. Sally got the garage open with a key she had not used in 2 years. The Camaro started against all odds on the second turn. In the apartment building 3 blocks east on 104th, the broken front door of 105A swung in the rising wind. The radiator on the wall was no longer humming. The basil on the sill was straight up and tall as if it had been watered with rain. 3 pebbles on 3 sills glowed faint silver and then, slowly, faded. A man in a green raincoat was already on the stoop downstairs. He had seen Sally come down the stairs in too much of a hurry. He had let her go, because what came next was not for him to interrupt. It was for him to repair when his sons reached safety. He looked up at the empty window of 105A, and then at the storm rolling in from the east, and his face did something that no human face has the muscles to do, and then he went into the building, alone, and walked up 3 flights of stairs to do something the police would later describe as acts of God on the plumbing of a single apartment, unexplained, no damage to neighbors. He did not stay. He had a longer drive ahead of him than the boys did. In Albania, the thin thing in the ruined house felt the dark mark on his servant Avery wink out, and his eyes went wide and stayed wide for nearly a full second, which for him was a long time. He said into the still air of his hideout, "What in the name of every name killed Avery in 3 minutes?" He had no answer. He sat down. He did not pace, he thought. After a long time he said, "Wormtail, I was wrong about the second instance. The boy in Manhattan is not a child to be plucked. The boy in Manhattan is a hand that must be cut off. Find me Bellatrix's old letter about the Greek hostages of 79. Find me the book in the 3rd trunk on Crouch's father's old key. We are going to plan this differently. We are going to take a hostage." Wormtail bowed. He said, "My lord, which one?" The thin thing said, "Whichever one the older one loves more." Outside in the Albanian dusk, a single thin fork of skyborn white went between 2 clouds. The thin thing did not see it. The snake at his feet did, and it lifted its head and watched the sky for a long time afterward and did not speak. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The father who didn't know in Albania in the small hours of the morning, the thin thing called Wormtail to him. Wormtail came at a run. Wormtail had spent 15 minutes in the only other inhabitable room of the ruined house with his face in his hands, and his shoulder pressed against the cracked plaster, and the small, polite sound of his own teeth chattering. Wormtail had grown used to many things in his service. The look on his master's face when the mark on Avery had winked out had been a new thing. The thin thing had not blinked for what felt to Wormtail like a long minute, and then the thin thing had said, very softly, "Oh," and Wormtail had run. Now the thin thing was sitting up on the divan that propped his rag of body, with his hands folded carefully in his lap. The snake was on the floor in a coil, watching the door, which was unusual for the snake. The thin thing said, without looking at Wormtail, "Sit down." Wormtail sat. "I was wrong this evening," the thin thing said, "in two regards. The first is that I was wrong about Avery. He was not a strong man, and he could not have been killed by a 14-year-old boy in 2 minutes by ordinary spellcraft. The other thing in the apartment with him was not a wizard, or it was, but it was also something else." He paused. Wormtail did not speak. "The second wrong was the one I made 12 years ago. The blood of the boy is not blood that can be taken at the end of a knife in a graveyard, Wormtail. The blood of the boy will not stay on the knife. We have seen this in the test right, and now I understand it. The boy is not only a wizard. The boy is, and the second instance is, a piece of the older world. The world that wrote the rules our world is written on top of. Do you understand?" Yes, my lord, I think yes." "You don't, but you will pretend until you do. Good." A small pause, a thin smile. "We will not then take the boy. We will take in the way of the older world what the boy values, and we will trade. Bring me Bellatrix's letters, the ones from Crouch Pier's library, the ones with the Greek seal." Wormtail brought them. The thin thing read in silence for an hour. Wormtail watched the snake watch the door. The snake's tongue flickered every 22nd second, like a clock being kept by something that did not itself sleep. When the thin thing had finished reading, he said, "Send Selwyn. Send Mulciber. Send the Lestrange brothers, I know they are in Norway. Send them all. Tell them not to engage the boy. Tell them to take whichever one the older boy loves more, by which I mean a small one of his own age or younger. There will be a small one. They will not have to look hard." He looked into the dark. "I will write," he said, "to the boy himself." Wormtail did not know that there was, somewhere over the dark Atlantic, a thin fork of white lightning that did not strike, a thin fork that knew its target was driving very carefully on the Cross Bronx Expressway in an old American Camaro, and that knew, also, that for the first time in 1,000 years there were two of them in one car. The lightning waited. In the Camaro, Sally Jackson drove with her hands at 10 and 2, and she did not speak for the first hour. Harry sat in the back seat with Percy on one side and Remus's coat on the other. Percy had fallen asleep against Harry's shoulder before the first toll, the way kids do when adrenaline drains. Harry let him sleep. He himself was awake in a way he had not been awake in 3 years, his eyes pinned to the wing mirror, the side window, the road behind. He had Avery's wand in his sock, and his own wand in his sleeve, and the shells in his pocket, and a feeling in his chest like a low hum that was probably the engine and was probably also him. Remus in the passenger seat said quietly, "Sally, I'm going to put up a protection on the car. You won't feel it. The car will. Will you let me?" "Please," Sally said. He did. 3 small flicks of his wand at the dash, the doors, the rear glass. The Camaro, an old car that had seen better days but had been kept up by an owner who could not have explained why she kept it, took the spell as if it had been waiting for one. Harry watched the spell settle on the metal in his peripheral vision, a sheen that wasn't a sheen, a faint silver line at the edges of every door. The fuel gauge needle, which had been on 3/4, ticked up 1 notch, which Sally noticed and did not remark on. They left the city. They went over the Throg's Neck Bridge in the rain. The water of the East River below was so still in the storm that Harry could see, with the new way he could see things, that it was waiting for him. He nodded down at it as they crossed. The water rose very slightly in a single ridge and lay back down and let them pass. On the other side, Sally said, "I need to stop, just for 10 minutes. There's a diner I used to know. I want to look at all of you under proper light. And I want to drink coffee that isn't the coffee in my apartment." "Sally," Remus said, "we shouldn't. 10 minutes, Mr. Lupin, please. I have driven through a storm and a lightning strike and the worst night of my life, and I would like 10 minutes. Remus did not argue. People had stopped arguing with Sally Jackson tonight. The diner was on the service road off 25A, a gray box with a half-lit sign that said Bayside Diner above it, and a row of small windows steamed with condensation against the rain. Sally pulled into the lot, 2 trucks and a station wagon. She parked at the back, turned off the engine, and sat with her hands on the wheel for 10 seconds. Then she said, "All right, let's go in." They went in. A waitress in her 60s with silver hair and a name tag that said Marge looked up from a crossword and said, "Sally, Sally Jackson." And Sally smiled the kind of smile that hurt to make and said, "Hi, Marge." "Long time," and Marge nodded twice and didn't ask any questions, because Marge had been a waitress for 40 years on a service road and had learned to read a face. They took the booth at the back, the one out of sight of the front door. Marge brought coffee, hot chocolate for Percy, and a basket of fries. Percy was awake again now and was holding his mug in both hands and was listening very hard to the air. "He's coming, isn't he?" Percy said, not to anyone in particular. "Yes," Sally said. "Now. Soon." The bell above the front door rang. A man came in. He was tall, taller than Remus, though not by much. He was tanned the way men who worked outside on the water for a living were tanned. He had on a green raincoat over a faded fisherman's jumper, and a pair of jeans worn through at the knees. His hair was black with the salt gray streak at the temples that some men got at 40 and some men got at 60, and there was no telling on him which it was. His eyes were sea green. Marge looked up from her crossword. "Coffee, sir." "Black, please," he said. His voice was low and careful, like a man trying very hard not to be loud in a quiet room. "Take it on me, please. Anything anyone in the diner has tonight." "Sir, you don't have to, I know," he said. "Take it." He paid in cash, 3 20s for what was 4 cups and some fries, and waved off the change. Marge thanked him with the suspended air of a woman whose night had just stopped being ordinary and went back to her crossword without looking up again. The man came to the booth at the back. He stopped at the end of it. He looked at Sally. Sally looked back. They did not speak for a long second. Then the man looked at Percy. Percy went still, not afraid still, the other kind, the still of a creature meeting another of its species in the wild. Then the man looked at Harry. The man's mouth did a thing it did not have words for. He put his hand briefly on the back of the booth as if for steadiness. He sat down on the bench beside Sally on the outside, leaving Sally next to the wall, and he put his hands flat on the formica and he looked at his sons. "Hello, Sally," he said. "Hello, Perseus." "Hello, Harrison," Percy said. "Perseus." The man, almost smiling, said, "It is your full name. Your mother chose it for me. It was a kindness." Sally said very quietly, "Hi." The man said, "I owe you many things, Sally. I owe you most of them." Sally said, we can do that part later. Talk to them." The man turned to Harry first, not to Percy, to Harry. "Harrison," he said. "Harry. Harry, I am sorry," Harry said evenly. "For which thing?" The man, Poseidon, Harry thought, although the room held no shimmer and the lights did not flicker and there was no music swelling, only a tired sea god in a wet raincoat in a diner, closed his eyes for a second and opened them. "For not knowing," Poseidon said, "that I had you, which is a poor kind of sorry, I know, because the not knowing was its own failure. I will tell you the shape of it as plainly as I can, because you deserve plain, and I have not been a plain man for a long time." Harry waited. "I took human form," Poseidon said. In the summer of '78, in a fishing village on the south coast of England near a town called Linton, I called myself Peter Johnson. I will not bore you with why a god takes human form. I was lonely. I was tired of my hall. The form I took was so thorough that I did not know when I was in it that I could conceive in it. I had been certain it was not possible. I had taken many forms before and never made anything that lived. With Lily I made you. I did not know it that summer or the next or the one after. When she was killed, I felt it, the way I feel when any human I have known is killed. I felt your survival a moment after. I did not know what I had felt. I thought it was an echo or a dream of mine. When I tried to find the source, and I did try, Harry, you must believe me about that one thing, though I will give you no reason to believe me about any of the others. I could not. Lily's last work on you cloaked you from every kind of finding. Olympian, wizard, the kind I do which is older than both. For 13 years I knew there had been a child of mine and a child no longer was. I did not know which. I stopped looking, because looking made it worse, and because, this is the worst thing I will say to you, looking would have brought my brother's attention to whichever child it was that survived, if any had. So I made a coward's choice. I made the choice to mourn instead of to look. Harry sat very still. Then a month ago, Poseidon said, the sea began to speak louder along the south coast of England in a way that I was made to hear. It spoke in a voice that was a child's voice. I went to listen. I knew, I think, on the second day. I waited a third because I was afraid. I was afraid of what I would find I had been doing wrong for 13 years. I am sorry, Harry, that is the whole of it. I have nothing to set against it. Harry said, did James know? Poseidon said, yes. Your stepfather knew. We met once, in Devon. He came to find me. He took the long route around. Your mother gave him a name in the long route. He did not ask me to leave. He did not ask me anything except whether I would harm you. I told him he told me to be ready to come back to you one day if you needed me. I told him I would. He shook my hand. He was, Harry, he was a good man. I have not met very many of those in my line of work. I owed him a drink. He has not lived to drink it. I have owed many men drinks. He is the one I most regret. Harry felt, quietly, the seam of a thing in his chest that had been waiting to come undone. He did not weep. He did not speak. He took a sip of his coffee, which had gone cold, and put the mug down. He said, thank you for telling me about James. Thank me when I have done a thing for you, Poseidon said. Do not thank me for words. He turned then to Percy. Perseus, he said. Hi, Percy said, you have done well in your 11 years. Thanks you've never come. Why not? My brother watches you. If I came to your door, my brother knew at once. So long as I did not come to your door, you were a possibility he could ignore. I have spent 12 years pretending to ignore you. I am sorry, Perseus. I am sorry for both of you in different ways, and I do not want to make either sorry smaller than it is by pretending it is the same as the other. Percy said softly, Mom said you were good. Your mother is more generous to me than I have earned. She was right, though. Poseidon's face, Harry saw it clearly, did the thing the man's face had done in the apartment doorway in Manhattan, which was the thing no human face had quite the muscles for. It was not a god's face. It was a father's face who had not been one in any practical way in 12 years and had been told by his son that he was good. I am trying to be, Poseidon said. He turned to Sally. He did not say anything. Sally did not say anything either. They had, Harry guessed, the longest of the 3 conversations to have, and they did not have it tonight because the diner was not the place and the boys were not the audience and there was a sky outside that was not done with them. Poseidon said, finally, there is a place where my brother will not strike. It is on Long Island. A camp. You are going to it. You should reach it by dawn. The stretch of road from here to the camp is mine, the sound is mine, the rain is mine, the road runs along my coast. He will not strike on my road. He will, however, strike on the road around the camp. Once you are inside the line of pines, you are safe from his hand. From his hand, Harry said. He has other tools. Fine, we will deal with the other tools. Poseidon, surprising Harry, almost laughed. It was a small, dry laugh. You are very young to say a sentence like that and mean it. You don't know me. No, Poseidon said, not yet. I would like to. Harry did not say I would like to too. He did not say I am not sure. He said we will see. That is fair. Why is your brother angry? His master bolt, Poseidon said, has gone missing. He believes I took it. I did not take it. He is in a position to believe I did because a great many of his and my disagreements have ended badly. He has decided to retaliate. Now that he has noticed there are two of you, he has decided to retaliate by shortening both of your lives at once. You did not take his bolt. I did not. Who did? Poseidon paused. I do not know yet, he said. I have suspicions. They are not for tonight. Harry filed the suspicions in the same pocket of his mind he had filed scaly around the ears. Poseidon said, I have brought something for you both. He opened his hand. There were 2 threads on his palm. Each thread was knotted around a single small pearl. The pearls were not white. They were the color of the inside of a wave at sunrise. Wear them, Poseidon said. If you are ever in a place I cannot reach, crush the pearl. I will hear. I will come or I will send, depending on what I can. Do not waste them. I have only the 2. He gave one to Percy. Percy put it on at once around his neck with a slightly trembling hand. He gave the other to Harry. Harry put it on too. The pearl was warm against his collarbone, the way the shells in his pocket had been warm, and the warmth went down into his chest and met the small new bruise where the seam had unstitched. Now, Poseidon said, eat something. You have a drive. Marge came up with the bill that Poseidon had paid and a refill of coffee. She did not look at Poseidon. She looked at the boys. She said, I'm Marge. I'm gonna bring you eggs, both of you. You don't have to ask. Eat 'em or don't, but I'm bringing 'em. Yes, ma'am, Percy said. She brought eggs. They ate. Poseidon ate too, which surprised Harry. He ate a single piece of toast slowly. He did not drink his coffee. He sat with his hands quiet on the formica and looked between bites at his sons in a way Harry was eventually going to be able to think about and was not tonight ready to. Halfway through the eggs, the front bell above the diner door rang again. A black dog came in. It was wet. It was long-muzzled. It had pale, intelligent, non-doggy eyes. Marge said no animals out of pure professional reflex and then looked at the dog and said, well, all right on a night like this, and put down a saucer of water by the door. The dog drank. The dog walked, unhurried, to the back booth. The dog sat down by Harry's foot and looked up at him with its head on one side. Harry put his hand down. The dog put its head under his hand for a moment, exactly 1 moment, and then it took 2 careful steps to the side of the booth, glanced at the front door, glanced at Marge. Marge was back at her crossword and unfolded itself in the small space between 2 booths into a man. He was thinner than Harry remembered. His eyes were the same. Hello, Sirius, Harry said, and he did not, for the first time in his life, sound like a 14-year-old boy. Harry, Sirius said. He put his hand on Harry's shoulder. He held it there for a second, the kind of squeeze a man gives a thing he has spent a long time being afraid he would not get to touch again. Then he turned and he registered the rest of the booth, and he said, Remus, and Remus said, Sirius, in a voice that was not surprise but the relief that had been waiting 2 years to come out of him. And he turned and registered Sally, and he registered Percy. And he registered last, the man in the green raincoat sitting on the bench with his hands quiet on the formica. Sirius looked at Poseidon. Sirius looked at Harry. Sirius looked at Poseidon. He said slowly, he said, James always said he'd buy you a drink. Poseidon almost laughed. He did. I have not collected. He'd have wanted me to, on him, whiskey, I think, a good one. He was not a beer man. He was not. I am Sirius Black. I am his godfather, a jerk of his chin at Harry. Or I was, or I am. I don't know what I am tonight. You are still that, Poseidon said. Sirius's face did an internal thing fast that he chose not to show. He said, "Pleased to meet you, sir." Poseidon gravely said, "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Black." Then, and this was the thing Harry would remember about this night for years and years, Sirius Black, on the run from two governments, sat down in the booth on Harry's side, put his arm around Harry's shoulders and started in on Harry's eggs without asking. He took a bite. He chewed. He swallowed. He said, "Reasonable. Marge can cook." Harry laughed. He had not laughed since the cove. It was a small, surprised, slightly choked laugh. He laughed into his godfather's shoulder. Sirius pressed his arm. "You shouldn't be here," Harry said. "I know. You're a wanted man. I know that too. How did you find us?" "I followed Remus in dog form. Remus knew. Remus did not stop me. We will discuss Remus later." Remus said mildly, "We will." Sally, who had not yet spoken to Sirius, said, "I'm Sally Jackson. I'm Percy's mother, and Harry's in a different way, I think." Sirius shook her hand across the table. "Sally, your family then. By extension. Then drink some coffee. You look like someone who should drink some coffee. Marge, could we get another mug?" Marge brought another mug. For a quarter of an hour, in the back booth of the Bayside Diner on a service road in Queens at 3 in the morning, 6 people who had not sat together since the dawn of time sat together at one table. They did not all talk at once. 2 of them mostly listened. 1 of them ate. One of them, the one in the green raincoat, sat with a half piece of toast in his hand and watched Harry quietly, steadily, like a man watching a coastline he had been at sea from for 13 years. When they got up near 4, Poseidon settled the rest of the bill with a fold of bills that was more than the bill. He stopped Sally at the door. "Sally," he said. "I know," she said. I know," she said again. "Later, not tonight. Get them to the camp, then we will talk." "Yes. Yes." "Thank you for coming, Peter." "Thank you, Sally, for everything, for all of it, for him," a glance at Percy, "and for him," a glance at Harry. Then lower, almost only to her, "I should have come sooner." "Yes," Sally said. "You should have. We will discuss that too, later." She kissed his cheek, not romantic, the kiss that was given between people who had been each other's youth and now were each other's mostly survivors of a life, and went out into the rain. Poseidon did not come with them to the car. He stood in the doorway of the diner and watched them get in. Sirius, in dog form again to keep below the eyeline of any passing oarer, jumped into the footwell of the back seat. Remus took shotgun. Sally drove. Harry, in the back, looked out the rear window as they pulled away. Poseidon raised one hand. The rain from the diner's porch out to the highway gentled, just a little, just enough that they would drive in fine weather while every other car on the road got the storm. Harry put his hand on the cold rear window. He did not wave. He said very quietly, "Thank you, Dad." The pearl on his collarbone warmed twice. The Camaro went east. Halfway to the camp in the long flat run before the bridge to Long Island proper, Sally said without turning her head, "Harry." "Sally." "You said his name out the back window. You heard me." "Yes. Sorry. Don't be sorry. I was glad." A pause. "Do you mean it?" she said. Harry watched the road behind them. The sky over Manhattan was breaking into pieces, lit at the edges by a far-off lightning that wasn't, for once, looking for him. "Yes," he said. "I mean it, mostly. Mostly is more than I had." "Yes," Harry said. He put his hand on Percy's hair. Percy was asleep again. The dog at his feet side, content as a dog could be, with one eye open. Remus was quiet in the front. Sally drove with her hands at 10 and 2 and out beyond the windshield on the eastern horizon, the first faint thinning of the dark before dawn began. Far ahead in the dark of the trees beyond Half Hollow Pond, a long, low animal roar, like the lowing of a wrong cow, carried on the salt air. Sally heard it. She did not say anything. Harry heard it. He did. He said, "We're close." "How close?" 2 miles, maybe." "How do you know?" "I don't know how I know. I know." Sally pressed the accelerator a careful inch. The Camaro, an old American car given to a young woman 13 years before by a god she had not yet stopped loving, took the road as if it had been built for it. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Brothers at the border. The Minotaur was on the road, a quarter-mile past the last left turn before the camp. It came out of the trees at the side of Farm Road 25A in the slow, deliberate, considering manner of a thing that had eaten before and intended to eat again. And it did not roar this time. It walked. It walked into the middle of the asphalt with the moon for the first time properly free of cloud behind it, and it stood in the road and lowered its head, and the size of it made Harry, who had seen Aragog and a Hungarian horntail at distance and a fully extended Dementor, recalibrate his sense of size on a single deep in breath. It was 8 feet tall. Its shoulders were the width of the Camaro's bonnet. Its horns from tip to tip were as long as a kitchen table. It was naked from the waist up and wore the rotting tatters of a pair of trousers that had been white once. Its hooves on the asphalt sounded like a horse's hooves at the start of a fox hunt. Sally said, "Oh, oh." Sirius in the footwell growled and did not turn. "Don't stop," Harry said. "Drive past it." "Harry, don't stop. They can't always turn quickly. Drive past it on the right." Sally, with the calm of a woman who had 2 boys in the back of her car and a god's pearl glowing at one of their throats, drove past it on the right. It turned faster than Harry had hoped. It came at the back left side of the Camaro at a charge. And Sally Jackson, Sally who had been a writing school dropout, Sally who had ironed shirts in the bedroom in Manhattan while her son did his homework on the floor, twitched the wheel a flat inch to the left and accelerated. The Minotaur went past the rear bumper. Its horn took the rear quarter panel off the Camaro in a long, ripping screech that made Percy come awake with a gasp and Sirius bare his teeth. "Hold," Harry said. "Hold, Sally, just to the gate." "There's no gate, Harry. There's a hill." "To the hill." Sally drove. The Minotaur came back at a charge that was even faster. A quarter-mile down the road there was a great pine, alone on a low rise, and beneath the pine a fence that wasn't a fence and a feeling on the air that even Sally felt. A sigh, a clearing, a "please come in," and the Camaro reached it at 60 miles an hour with the Minotaur 3 lengths behind. Sally slammed the brakes. The car slewed sideways across the gravel of the verge. The headlights swept across a tall figure standing under the pine, who was an old man with a long gray beard and the lower body, unmistakable in the headlight glare, of a horse. The Minotaur reached the back of the car. Harry was already out. He had been out from the moment Sally had touched the brakes, with his wand in his hand and a feeling at the bottom of his ribs that was made of the runoff ditch on the verge of the road, and the dew on the grass on the verge of the verge, and the long underground vein of water that ran under all the dirt of Long Island down to the Sound. He had not asked for any of those things to come up to him. They came. Percy was out a fraction of a second after him. Percy did not have a wand. Percy had. Harry saw this happening with the slowed-time clarity of any fight that mattered, his mother's house key on a string in his fist and his hood up and his eyes very bright and very angry, the angry of a son who had just seen the back of his mother's car taken off by a cow-headed thing. "Get behind me," Harry said. "No," Percy said. It was not a defiance. It was a fact. Percy was not behind anyone tonight. Harry, in some quiet, teacherly part of himself that was not yet 14, filed that under things to be proud of later. "Then beside me," he said. "Beside you," Percy said. The Minotaur charged. Harry had been in 2 duels in his life that mattered. He had been in many smaller fights he didn't count. None of them had prepared him for the speed at which a thing weighing 1,000 pounds could close a 30-foot gap. He had time to do exactly 2 things. He brought up the runoff ditch into a wave across the front of the car. He pointed his wand at the Camaro's passenger side mirror and fired, very precisely, a reductor. The wave hit the Minotaur in the chest. It did not knock it down. It did soak it head to foot in 3 seconds, which was useful. The reductor took the passenger side mirror off the car in a small white bang of glass, a distraction which was useful. In the half-second that the Minotaur turned its head to the bang, Percy went left and Harry went right, and the Minotaur came thundering through the center between them and through the wall of water, and into the gravel where Sally had already driven the Camaro out of its way. It skidded on its hooves. The water, with Harry holding onto it, got under its hooves and stayed there. It went down on one knee. Percy, who had said no to staying behind, ran straight at it. He ran with the absurd, tireless velocity of a small boy who had been bullied half his life and had not yet learned that he was small, and he leapt onto its lowered shoulder, and his hands closed on the right horn, and his weight twisted the head sideways. He did not have the strength to wrench the horn off. He had the leverage. That was enough. The Minotaur roared and shook its head, and Percy, with his teeth bared and his mother's keys gripped in his other fist, planted both feet and pulled. "Harry," Percy said through his teeth, "if you have a thing, I have a thing." The vein of water under the dirt, the long underground line he had felt in the bottom of his ribs as they pulled into the verge, came up. Not a wave, a blade, a rope of water 2 inches thick and 12 feet long, curling out of the soil at Harry's command in a single solid arc that took the Minotaur in the back of the bent knee and took the knee out from under it. The Minotaur went down, all the way down. Its forequarters hit the gravel hard enough that the gravel jumped. Percy, balanced on its shoulder, hauled. The horn came away in his hand. The Minotaur made a sound that was not a sound. It started to disintegrate from the head down, gold dust, pale and quiet, a fine drift that began at the top of its skull and spread down its body in the slow, irreversible way of a sandcastle going. "Sally," Harry said, sharp, because he had seen with the back of his eye the Minotaur's last move before it died. Sally was at the open driver's side door. The Minotaur, in the splay of its fall, had gone down with its remaining forearm extended, and its hand was a man's hand almost, was closing on Sally's wrist. She did not have time to scream. Harry did 3 things in one breath. He pointed his wand at the Minotaur's hand and shouted "Defindo," which was a charm he had used on twigs in herbology and on a shirt cuff once, and which he now turned on a dying god monster's wrist. The hand opened. He brought up the runoff ditch a second time. It was almost dry now, into a thin sheet that closed around Sally like a second body, a chrysalis of water as thick as a wetsuit, that hardened, for the 8 seconds it needed to harden, into something with the give of cold rubber. The Minotaur's hand, opening, slipped from Sally's wrist and through the chrysalis and away. The Minotaur dissolved in the gravel. Sally stood inside her wet shell with her eyes huge, and the shell relaxed and ran off her in one long sluice and pooled at her feet, and she was wet to the skin and breathing. She did not faint. Sally Jackson did not faint. She put her wrist on the door of the car, looked at it. The skin was unbroken, a single oval of red the size of a thumbprint where the Minotaur's grip had landed, and she said, "Thank you, Harry. You're welcome." Percy was sitting on the gravel with the horn across his knees. He was breathing in the irregular way of somebody who had run further than his body had agreed to. He looked at his hand on the horn, and he looked at his brother, and he said in a smaller voice than he had used yet, "Did I just, yes, yes, Percy, holy, yes." Sirius came out of the back of the car as a dog and went 3 quick strides to Sally and put his nose under her hand and licked her thumb. Sally laughed. It came out as a breath, not a real laugh, but it was a laugh. She put her free hand on Padfoot's head. "You're a good dog," she said. The figure under the pine cleared his throat. He came down the slope at a slow, careful walk. His lower body unhurried in the way only a centaur's body could be unhurried. And as he came, he resolved, in the headlights, into a man with kind, tired, very old eyes and a tweed jacket and a long gray ponytail, and the lower body of a white horse with a sock of gray on the off hind. Behind him, on the ridge above the pine, a shorter figure had appeared, in a Hawaiian shirt and chinos with a can of Diet Coke in his hand and the expression of a man who had hoped to spend the evening doing literally anything else. "Welcome to Camp Half-Blood," said the centaur. He looked at the gold dust. He looked at the broken horn. He looked at the boys. He said, "Bring them inside the line, please. I'll see to the road." A flick of his hand, not a wand, his hand, and the gold dust on the gravel lifted and dispersed on a wind that had not been there a second before. The torn-off quarter panel of the Camaro, lying on the verge, was suddenly not on the verge. The skid marks on the road suddenly were not skid marks anymore. The asphalt was clean. Harry, watching, thought, "Not bad." The centaur said to Sally, "Mrs. Jackson, I presume." Sally. "Sally, I am Chiron. I am the activities director here. We have a great deal to talk about. I should like to begin with Coco, if you do not mind." "Coco," Sally said faintly. "Yes, all right." Chiron looked at Percy. Chiron's face, and this was the thing that struck Harry, took on the very particular expression of a man who had been a teacher of small heroes for 3,000 years and who, even now, could not quite stop himself feeling an unprofessional flicker of fondness when one of them came over the line. "Perseus." "Hi, welcome." "Thanks." Then Chiron looked at Harry. The look went on a long second. "Ah," Chiron said very quietly. He came one step closer. He bent a little. He looked into Harry's face, and he looked at the lightning scar on Harry's forehead, and he looked at the pearl at Harry's collarbone, and he straightened, and he said, "I was told there was one. I was not told there were two. And I was not told the older one had been a wizard for 3 years already." "You weren't told that because nobody knew," Harry said. "Apparently not. Forgive me. The sea has been loud this summer, Mr. Potter, Harry Potter." Chiron's eyebrow lifted half an inch. Behind him, the man in the Hawaiian shirt who had come down the slope without anyone seeing him do it, said in a bored, sharp, pleasant voice, "Of course it is. Mr. Potter, of course it is." Harry turned to him. "And you are, Mr. D," the man said. "Activities director, technically. Chiron does the activities, I do the directing. Welcome to camp. Don't drown anyone." A swig of his Diet Coke. A look at Harry over the rim. "Oh," he said mildly, "you are trouble, aren't you?" "Yes, sir," Harry said evenly. Mr. D's mouth twitched. "I like that one," he said, not really to anyone. "Bring them up, Chiron, Coco, hop too." He turned and went up the slope with his Diet Coke. Chiron watched him go with a long-suffering look that bore the patience of 3,000 years and then turned back to the rest of them and said, "Come." They came. Across the line of pines was not what Harry had expected. He had been expecting something out of a wizarding holiday camp. He saw, instead, in the soft pre-dawn light, a wide bowl of green ground that fell away to a strawberry farm on one side and a creek and a big house on the other, and nestled in a horseshoe further down, a ring of cabins, each of them different. One made of weathered gray stone with shells around the door and a salt smell coming off it. One of polished bronze and golden glass. One of bone-white marble, many others, 12 in total, some shut up dark, some lit. The air past the line of pines was warmer by 10 degrees. The wind, which had been buffeting them all night, dropped to nothing the moment Harry crossed. He stopped. He stood inside the line and did the thing he had not done in 2 days, which was breathe out. "All right." Sirius's voice behind him he had transformed in the moment of crossing. "Yeah, you did good back there. Percy did. Both of you. Don't wear it modest. Doesn't suit you." Harry almost smiled. He turned and put his hand on Percy's shoulder. Percy was holding the broken horn in both hands and looking at it as if it might still bite him. Sally was beside him with her arm around his waist. Remus was a step behind, his coat dark with rain, his wand back in his sleeve. They were, all of them, alive, and most of them were dry. And Harry, for the first time since the cove in Cornwall, allowed himself a feeling that was bigger than alert and almost contained joy. A girl was standing near the closest cabin. She was 13 or 14, blonde in shorts and a camp half-blood t-shirt, with a knife in her belt and the slightly disconcerted expression of a person who had not expected to see, at 4 in the morning, 2 new boys and an English werewolf and a wet woman, and a stranger in dog form trotting after them. She had gray eyes that were very intelligent in a way Harry recognized, because Hermione's eyes were intelligent in the same way. "Annabeth," Chiron said, "wake the senior counselors, have Argus put the minivan in the garage. I want everyone in the dining pavilion in 20 minutes. "Sir," Annabeth said, "it cannot wait, child, 20 minutes." She went. 20 minutes later, in the dining pavilion, long stone tables, a bronze brazier in the middle of the open-air square, the first gray of dawn paling the sky over the Sound. 50 or so campers in pajamas and hoodies and sleep-rumpled hair stood in clusters, blinking at 4 strangers and the activities director, who normally never bothered with public announcements. Harry and Percy stood beside each other in front of the brazier. Chiron said, "There are 2 new campers tonight. I will say the one fact about them I am sure of, and I will let the rest declare itself. Their names are Perseus Jackson and Harry Potter. They are brothers." A small ripple in the crowd. Brothers were rare at Camp Half-Blood, where a divine parent did not, as a rule, have 2 surviving demigod children at the same time. Chiron said, "I would like everyone to be very quiet for the next minute, please." Everyone was very quiet. Above Percy's head, slow, beautiful, simple, a glowing trident shimmered into being in the air. It was sea blue. It was the size of a tall man's forearm. It hung calm above Percy's hair. Percy, who had had no idea that anything was about to happen above his head, looked up, looked at his brother, looked back up. The murmurs began. "Son of Poseidon, yeah, look. But that's not." The murmurs broke off. Above Harry's head, slowly also, a second trident shimmered into being. It was bigger. It was older. It was not sea blue, but a deeper color, the color of the sea half a mile down, where the light has not been in a long time, where the older creatures live. It hung, quiet, above Harry's hair. The pearl at Harry's collarbone went briefly gold. The brazier's flames went in 3 colors at once, and then settled on white. Every cup on every table in the pavilion lifted slowly, 2 inches into the air, and the water in every cup spun slowly in counterclockwise rotations, and the rotation stayed for the full length of the silence, and then very gently the cups settled back down without a single drop spilled. Annabeth Chase, somewhere in the second row, said the word "oh." Chiron, not loudly, said, both of them, of Poseidon." Mr. D, who had been leaning against a pillar with his Diet Coke and his Hawaiian shirt and his expression of mild theatrical boredom, finished his can. He crushed it in one hand. He said, "Well, I owe Hermes 100 drachma. I did not see that coming." Then he straightened, not theatrically, but with the unhurried economy of a god doing something he did not bother to pretend not to be, and he looked between the boys at the brazier, and he said, in a voice that carried across the pavilion without being raised, "Both of you are claimed, both of you are protected by the rules of this camp, and both of you are, with immediate effect, off limits for the rest of camp's nonsense for 48 hours. Find them beds, find them breakfast, find them dry clothes. I am going to bed." He walked off. He did not look back. Harry, at the brazier, met Chiron's eye. He said, "Are we likely to have any nonsense from the camp?" "Less than you would think," Chiron said. "We are old at being told that the rules just changed. You are not the first impossibility to walk in here. You are merely a more articulate one." "Thank you, sir." "Chiron, please. Chiron." Annabeth Chase came up to the front. She was very polite about it. She said, "I'm Annabeth, daughter of Athena. You'll be in the Poseidon cabin, cabin 3. It's empty. It has been since it was built. There are sheets in the cupboard. I'll show you." "Thanks," Percy said, who was, Harry could see, going to be very good at being claimed. I wasn't expecting to, Annabeth said. None of us were, Harry said. You're the older. I am. And you're a wizard, someone said wizard. That too. How does that work? I'll tell you when I figure it out. She nodded, satisfied, the satisfied of a brain that had been told there was a problem to solve and had been promised access to the data later. All right, this way. They walked across the dewy field toward cabin 3, weathered gray stone, salt smell coming off it, shells around the door, with the early sun beginning to come up over the sound and lighting the roof. Harry walked between Percy and Sirius. Remus walked behind, beside Sally. Sally was leaning on Remus, the only sign she had given that her wrist had been in a minotaur's hand half an hour ago. Halfway to the cabin, an owl came over the line of pines. It was not Hedwig. It was not, in fact, an owl. It was the nearest thing to an owl a black-feathered, red-eyed, slightly smoking small bird could be. It came in low in the dawn light, flying arrow-straight across the grass at Harry. It dropped on the slope just in front of him, a small black scroll. It pulled up, banked, and was gone over the trees before any of the camp's wards had thought to challenge it. Harry picked up the scroll. It was sealed in a black wax with no symbol pressed in. Annabeth said, "What's that?" "Mail," Harry said. He broke the seal. "Dear Harry, I have not forgotten you. I have been thinking about you in a constructive way, which I expect you will dislike. I have not yet decided what I would like to do to you. But the small new shadow at your shoulder, the one with my brother's eyes and not mine, is a marvelous lever. I should like to make use of him. You will give yourself to me at a place and time of my choosing. You will give yourself in the calendar's first week of November on the night of Samhain. If you do not, I shall take the small one. I will not kill him quickly. I have time. You may keep this letter. Burn it if you like. I have copies." Harry read it twice. The second time he read it slowly, with a small steady fire growing in him that was not anger so much as resolution. Then he held the parchment out at arm's length over the grass, and he thought a thing at it, and the parchment did the thing he asked. It went up, not in a wizard's flame, in a small clean roll of seawater that came up out of the grass under his hand and engulfed it and squeezed and dropped a small wet black ash to the dewy ground. Annabeth said, "Whoa." Sirius, looking at the ash, said quietly, "Tell me." "Voldemort." Remus's face moved in the way only Remus's face moved when Voldemort was named in a quiet morning in a place that had been safe a moment ago. "Knows about Percy," Sirius said. "Yes. He's going to try. Harry, he won't get him. Harry, listen to me. If you go alone on Samhain anywhere he has chosen, I'm not going to go," Harry said very evenly. "I'm going to find him before Samhain with Percy at my shoulder, and we are going to make it not happen." Sirius looked at him. Sirius opened his mouth to argue. Sirius closed his mouth. "Right," Sirius said. "All right, right." Percy, at Harry's elbow, said, "Who is he?" "He's the man who killed our mother. My mother's not dead. Mine, the one who had me. Her name was Lily. He killed her when I was a year old. He's been a thing rather than a man for a long time. He's coming back. He wants me dead. He has decided that the way to get me to come to him is to take you." Percy was quiet. He said, "He won't get me. Number, and we're going to find him first." "Yes, you and me, you and me. And Mom." Harry looked at Percy. He said, "And Mom, if she'll come." Sally, behind them, said, "I'll come." Harry turned. Sally was very pale and very tired and very wet, and she was standing with her hand on Remus's elbow and her wrist held against her stomach, and she was looking at her sons with a look that Harry was going to remember later in his head when he needed it. She said, "I am not done, Harry, not by half. He took a hand to my wrist tonight. He will not get a hand to my son." She paused. "Either of them," she said. Harry put the ash from Voldemort's scroll under the heel of his trainer and ground it into the grass. They went into cabin 3. The cabin was beautiful inside in a way that was austere. 6 bunks, 4 of them never slept in. A window that looked out over the strawberry fields. Walls hung with tools that were not weapons in the ordinary sense. A fishing net, a spear with a curve of salt water always playing along the head, a coiled rope of seaweed, a bone whistle. The floor was sand-colored stone. The air was cool. The smell was the smell of tide flats at dawn. Annabeth made up 2 of the bunks with quick, efficient hands. She did not stay. She paused at the door and looked at Harry and said, "I want to talk to you about wizards. When you're ready. I have books about everything except wizards, and I'd like a primary source." "Tomorrow," Harry said. "Tomorrow," Annabeth said and went. Sirius and Remus, in the next-door cabin Chiron had quietly assigned them as guests, would settle in as the sun came up. Sally, after she had washed her wrist and changed into a borrowed Camp Half-Blood t-shirt, would sleep, finally, on a folding cot in the big house for the few hours she had left of the night. Harry did not sleep right away. He sat on the steps of cabin 3 with his bare feet on the cool stone and Percy beside him in fresh clothes, and they watched the dawn come up over Long Island Sound. The pearls at their throats were quiet. The shells in Harry's pocket, both of them, were warm. Out on the water beyond the camp's beach something happened. The Sound, which had been flat in the lee of the storm, lifted, not in an ordinary swell, in a wave. A single, rising, deliberate wave 2 miles long, 10 feet tall at its crest, that started a quarter-mile off the camp's beach and rolled south toward the open ocean for as long as the boys could see it. The crest of the wave did not break. It held. It went in a slow thunder, away over the horizon, far up the coast, in Connecticut, on a dock at Old Saybrook. A fisherman who had been casting since 4 reeled in his line and stared at the wave going past and crossed himself and said, to nobody in particular, "I'll be damned." Far down the coast, off Sandy Hook, the first ferry of the morning rocked in a swell it had no business rocking in, and the captain, a man who had been on the water for 30 years, glanced at his radar and back at the unbroken sea and said into the radio, "What in the name of Jersey are you seeing this?" On the porch of cabin 3, Harry watched the wave go, and he understood without being told what it was for. It was not for him. It was past him. It was for the brother above. It was a sentence in a language that was older than English. It was for any of the older things in any quarter of any sea or sky who were thinking about taking a hand to either of these boys. It said, "Try." Percy said softly, "Was that, yeah, he's saying, yeah. He doesn't talk much, does he? Number, but when he does." "Yeah," Harry said and laughed. The dawn climbed. The brazier in the dining pavilion went out behind them. A couple of campers, who had not gone back to bed after the claiming, were down at the volleyball court doing impossible serves with the wind they had brought from their parents. Annabeth was somewhere finding books about wizards. Sirius was somewhere eating breakfast. Sally was somewhere sleeping for the first time since the previous afternoon. Harry stood up. Percy stood up with him. Without anyone telling them to, they walked down to the beach. They walked into the surf to their ankles. They were both barefoot. The water came up around them in a small ring and held there polite the way the cove in Cornwall had held. Harry said, "So, brothers." Percy said, "Brothers." The sea climbed an inch around their ankles in something like approval. The first sun broke across the water. A long way off, the wave that was not a wave any more had become a horizon. Harry's hand found Percy's. Percy's hand was cold and wet and small. Harry held it. "Tomorrow," Harry said, "Annabeth's books, then we plan." "Plan what?" "Everything. Voldemort, Zeus, your school, my school, where we'll be at Samhain, what we'll do then, who we trust and who we don't." "Okay, all of it." "Okay." A pause. Percy said, "Harry." "Yeah, I'm glad you came." Harry closed his eyes. The sea against his ankles, the first warm sun on his face, a brother's hand in his hand, the pearl warm at his throat, his mother's voice in some half-remembered Greek lullaby coming back, suddenly, after 13 years. "I'm glad, too," he said. The sun came up the rest of the way over the Sound. The 2 sons of the sea god stood in their father's water and did not move for a long time. Chapter 6 End.